Chris Denaro. I'm co-chair of the Warner's Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:07. I will now take a roll call of task force members present. Why don't we start, Vicky, with you? We'll do it inside. We'll
Hey,
start
Vicky.
here first.
Vicky Alani.
Paul Bone, present.
Celia Kay.
Malcolm Bryan.
Rick Morrison.
Jeff Collins.
Sven Vivo.
Mark Howell.
Chris Denaro.
And Bill Kamazin.
And online we have
Keith
Ann Clifford present. Oh,
Keith,
David
Ann
Owen.
Clifford present.
And Clifford.
Ann Clifford.
Bruce,
Bruce. Yeah, Bruce Curtis.
Bruce,
I'm here.
yes,
Yeah, Keith is on. Jeff, quick, you get him?
Yeah.
Bert.
yeah.
I don't think that's Paul.
No, Paul's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So, our main goals for tonight's meeting are to, decide on how to proceed with the knowledge, attitudes, and practices study, and to share feedback on all of our, work group proposals, to whether approve them, finalize them, move forward with them. You can see that the agenda is up on the slide. And we will open the meeting to public comments in a few minutes. And then again, we'll open it up to public comments at the end of the meeting. The meeting's being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. Before we move to the public comment though, I would like to approve the November 13, 2024 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the November 13th, 2024 minutes? Motion, thank you, Sven. Second. Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion at all? Okay, all those in favor? Shall we?
Is there a roll call?
To do a roll call, so why don't we start again, Vicky? We'll start with you, in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes. Aye.
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 Aye as well.
Aye.
Online,
Aye.
Aye.
I'm non-voting.
This is
And-
Keith is I.
okay,
Aye.
Bruce,
Non-voting.
sorry. Okay. I believe we have everybody. The minutes are approved as written. The November 13, 2024 minutes. Yes, Paul.
Question, I don't recall our practice previously on minutes, but the public comments are recorded in the minutes in great details. Has that been our practice
Yes,
all along?
yes.
Okay. Fine. Thank you.
They're
Okay,
usually at the end, and we started doing them in the beginning, so it may look different
Okay,
than from the very beginning.
yeah.
okay.
Bill, public comments?
Sure, so we will open it up for public comments at the beginning of this meeting, as we've done before. Again, asking you to keep it brief and respectful. And really, please, no more than 2 minutes. We have a lot of business today. So, any public comments? Yes, identify yourself. Yes,
Well.
sure. Maybe stop sharing.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, please.
I'm Denise Gilbert. I crossed off a few lines to make it shorter.
Good.
I've weighed what I've heard and feel that we should continue to do what we can to save Warner's Pond for future generations. I understand that aquatic plant life is overwhelming the pond and that attention is necessary. Finances are a huge factor. The task force has revealed ways to alleviate cost with closer delivery of dredged material. The cost of maintaining a marsh area has untold expenses as well, and unwanted consequences as well, which should be as carefully considered as the cost of saving the pond. After speaking with Peter Alden, a local naturalist, ecotourism guide, author, and spokesman for biodiversity, I learned that the proposed marsh will not necessarily be the lovely field we imagine, but a muddy marsh, hardly dry area filled with invasive plants such as Phragmites. After loosestrife, which is invasive, Phragmites take over the space completely, overcoming everything else around. The water that nourishes the area will not be fresh, but filled with oils not suited for diverse life. The concept of a beautiful marsh sounds dreamlike, but is it real? When it comes to recreational activities, I can't see or imagine that anything proposed, such as a viewing dock overlooking a marsh, can provide anything suitable for our town compared to the activity that a pond provides. Anyone who has seen Warner's Pond from any view knows how beautiful it can be. There is the irreplaceable reflection of the sky and clouds, the movements of the water, and the aquatic birds. A water view calms the system, widens awareness of a world that is greater than we know. I feel strongly that Warner's Pond is an asset to all of Concord, a natural wonder, and worth working hard to save. The time and consideration that the town is giving to this cause is greatly appreciated. And I just hope for today and future generations that we can save Warner's Pond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Please come forward. Mary, you can give us again, identify yourself.
Mary Weinberg, 26 Hillside Avenue, West Concord. I quickly have held this up before, but at the end, I'm going to give the website again. Nate Smith downloaded this in 1985, 1983, the West Concord Center study strongly encouraged to try as much as possible for use of the water in West Concord. Also in 1988, we had a proposal that almost made it through to create a town common. And it said, imagine a West Concord Center with a broad expanse of green grass to one side that stretched all the way down to the mossy banks of the Assabet River. A canoe landing and a small trail along the river, pleasant access. It was also going to be housing for the elderly. These were the two proposals. I'm not going to go into it now because at another time I'll explain. This was one of my failures, and one doesn't always put a failure on a resume. But I haven't discussed it in all these years, but I think I'd love for people to ask me what happened to this. That's why I'm appearing before you tonight, because the other people who worked on it have died or don't remember anything, and I'm the last survivor. So I'm going to truly throw my heart into this to make sure we don't lose this one. I have been in touch with the, it's called the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging, the University of Massachusetts in Boston. They work with 40 towns. Caitlin, the director, has sent me a number of wonderful research articles, medical articles. There is tons more, and we're researching it, and it will be presented to this group and other town committees. But the National Library of Medicine, peer reviews, documentation, it's absolutely endless. Blue space defined in all this medical research, so important. And I'm not going to go into the details of all the levels, but one of them is for the elderly, and I'm turning 80, which is one of me, but it's very good. I hope that this will become an instrument of discussion in every committee in our town before we begin things. I'm not going to speak anymore. I have shingles. I won't speak again at 8:30 because my pain medicine will be not working. So this was very important about this and the blue space.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak? Mary, it was just 2 minutes, actually.
And I did write it down. Good.
Anyone on, online?
Oh.
Ah.
This is from Mayflower that she painted this in August.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
That is
And
good.
it's
Thank you.
by artists. the water, the beauty.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, no one else? Okay, I'll turn it back over to you. Chris.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next thing we'll be going into is our decision-making on the knowledge, attitudes, and practices study. So, Rachel?
Could I just?
Yes, Malcolm, go ahead.
Liz and I did what Bruce suggested and didn't really think about this until yesterday. And we sat down and looked at the timeline. There is no way. Given the delays that have been in bringing us here, we need 7 weeks to get the study done. And if the goal is to have it done pre public meeting post, we can't do that. So I think that unless you're interested in having just a single study, which we wouldn't be able to get out, didn't get finished until March, the end of March, then I think it was dead in the wood. I'm sorry. I raised this on October 10th, and we're now at the end of December. Unless somebody wants to say something, I think there's no point in any further discussion.
Well, we appreciate the time and effort that you both have put into it.
Would there be, we had talked last month about having before and after with the public conversation, have changed attitude with that inform us.
Yeah.
Then there would be on having a single run. Would having a single run later provide information?
It depends on what people want out of it. I assume that by the end of March, we will have already made our decision. So it would be a little closing the barn door up. What's it called? Sort of thing. I would love to do it. Because I think there's a lot of information to be gathered, and I think it could be something in the town, there's a lot more of it. But we can't do it as original. And I'm really sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Malcolm. I don't know what we could do. I mean, I think, we are pressed a little bit for time. We're already going to go beyond the December deadline. We don't want to go too far into next spring, we want to finish as soon as we can. So I appreciate the work you've done myself. I know Chris does and others that do. And it's a fascinating study. I never heard of a CAPS study before you raised it. And I realized it had started in a lot of medicine fields.
It's very much a social science
Yeah.
study. It's used in healthcare, obviously.
Healthcare,
where it originated in family planning.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've seen
And, but it's used in many other social science fields now. The environmental health, agriculture. Something else on my list somewhere, but.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Okay, so I think we can press ahead unless there's more discussion on the CAP study. But do also want to echo the appreciation for the work that Liz and Malcolm put into it. Clearly very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And we understand the impulse and interest behind getting us as much good information as we can get to get into our decision making. So with that, we'll press forward to the next item on our agenda, which we do expect will take a good amount of time. So we can get after some of that with the second helpful from that. So we wanted to spend some time talking about the written word for proposals. So let me just say a word about sort of how we want to suggest we think about this. So we're moving into potentially having a public meeting, right? Likely early February, right? If we're thinking right now, we want to send out in advance or have available in advance of that meeting and advertise to the public that these proposals can be reviewed, that we put a lot of thought into what the different alternatives for the pond could look like. You can go online and read through them in detail, and we'll also be presenting about them when we have the meeting. And so we want to get those in good shape, so it feels like they're ready to actually go out to the public. So the purpose of going through them today is just to check in, right? And think together, what else should we be doing with these, right? How can we strengthen each of them so that they're ready to go out in early 2025? What should we add? What should we change? What should we subtract? And after today, we are welcoming everyone who wants to send in more detailed written comments. So we want to maybe kind of remove the pressure of feeling like you need to say everything in this workshop or this session today, right? You can send in things after today online through written comments, and we'll share them publicly, of course, right, as we're required to do. So that's the general plan. The other thing, and Rachel, you should chime in on this as well. We did receive, some comments before, and those will also be shared. We didn't want to send any more written comments to folks before this meeting, just given the full extent of what's already been sent out. So I'll just say through those comments, and I'm sure we'll hear from folks who may have submitted that, and also our own conversations, we sense that there's kind of an interest in consistency across these, and maybe a benefit to the meeting and to the public receptiveness of them, that they sort of be aligned in a certain way. And we're feeling and wondering, like, maybe this is a way that CBI can help out the group by taking sort of the suggestions on how to improve consistency and being the responsible, in some sense, for enacting what the group wants between now and the January meeting. Of course, everything that we would do would be based on your feedback and would be fully transparent, right? We'll show you every single suggestion that we want to come back to you with. But then we could have, hopefully, some consistency across these, and we meet again and look at a revised versions in that January meeting. So again, we can talk about the different proposals. That's our main purpose, but we also just want to put out there that that's an option and something that we do very frequently with these kinds of convenings, and are very happy to take on service of this group if there's an interest.
Essentially, we're offering to be editors,
Yeah,
not to change the content and the substance, and anything we did, we would send back to them. Function to pull the three proposals into clear alignment. So that would, because that's something that all of you expressed, and we agree, it's really important. You want the public to have that really parallel, kind of view of each of these, and that's a function that we can serve for you, we can do it quickly.
So essentially, you're telling us you're gonna reconstruct, which is a good thing, I
Not
think.
reconstruct.
Well, let me just say this, to construct or use a template for all three proposals. Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
They're all.
I know they're close, yeah, but that should
But
be
there are
fantastic. That way, it'll be easier to read for us from one to another, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, that's right.
Cool.
I mean, there's a template issue that's clear. In reading through these, how should I put? In each one of these, there's a base proposal. And then there are other features, especially on the dam removal proposal. There's some dam removal per se, and then there's a variety of recreational features.
Yeah,
And they all kind of add up into costs, and I'm just wondering, to put these on the same basis, if we can, does each one of them has a base proposal? And then additional features, and those, the dam proposal is great, but that's a lot of things. Are they all essential to the proposal, or are some of they? So, and, the dredging one is slightly different, it has 3 different alternatives. We haven't even discussed whether there's a base case or return, so I'd have to think that, get them on the same plane as far as, here's the basic proposal.
Yes.
Because there are costs associated with all these, we have to be pretty transparent on what we know about that.
Mhm.
So I think that's something to think about, how we
Yeah.
get these on the same
Yeah.
base.
100%.
Yeah, because
base, you know what I mean?
we don't take away important criteria or aspects of each of the proposals, because they are different, right? They're talking about different things, so there's going to be information in some that is not in the others because of the complexity or whatever, and so we're gonna have to weigh that and try to figure out a way to do this so that we get that really balanced view across the 3, but we don't want to just like make them the same just to make them the same.
No, they're all different. I don't know how to implement, but it's
Yeah.
something to consider.
Solve.
You're getting your guidance on that today.
Right, and that's part of this.
I think Sven was first.
Okay.
So just, yeah, let's go to Sven in a second. I just want to say, we want to maybe put a little bit of structure to this conversation. Let's have kind of the general discussion now, maybe cross-cutting issues, and then we do want to spend some time going through each proposal individually. So, you know, let's have this now, and then we can go there in a few minutes, but go ahead, Sven.
Yeah, just two comments. One comment to what you just said is, I think each of the proposals has these additional features. And in fact, every proposal mentions access improvements to the pond, or in the other case, access improvements to the marsh. But the big difference, I'd say, in the dam removal is that it was more specified, priced out, versus the others leave the price cost open. At both the dredging and the do nothing talk about improvement of access. It's just not priced out. The other thing I would more interested in, we had kind of this criteria set designed in the beginning. Each group went through it with their own kind of, in their own bubble. But I think what my understanding was when we did the criteria set, that we have at a certain point an exercise to say, we have the three proposals. And how do the three proposals score along the criteria set to make them comparable? Is this still the plan, or how is this made?
So, I mean, we can speak a little bit to that, right?
You're talking
yeah.
about the next.
The next, yeah.
phase.
But before we go to the public.
Yeah, so what we're thinking, right, and I think what we're kind of setting up for you all is in the public meeting, right, we're not going to say to the public, you know, we give this a 10 on natural resources and this one a 5, right, as a task force. But we haven't sorted that out, and everyone is going to have different perspectives on that, and that's sort of the exercise that we collectively need to do. In addition, we want to hear from the public, right, on how they're thinking about how these different proposals shape out, right? So we're going, yes, we are thinking about the criteria, and I think it's a worthwhile exercise maybe for us as a group to decide, you know, how do we want to share that with the public, right? When we put these presentations up online, obviously, folks are listening now, you can go see what these proposals look like, they're available, right? But when we officially share it, right, how do we treat the criteria? We need to be clear. We as a task force have not decided on how we think these compare on these criteria against each other, right? So there's an important distinction there. When we get to the next phase, after we hear from the public, that's exactly what we're going to be working on as a group, right? Using the criteria that we've discussed, weighing these proposals against each other, and taking elements maybe from different ones if we think those are valuable, right? And could be combined in some way, and then deciding where we want to go moving forward based on it. We will walk you through exactly how that will look and what we expect will happen when we do that. So don't worry, you know, we're not trying to make it a black box. It's just, you know, we want to take on one thing at a time, right? So that's the thinking, but it's obviously for the group to decide. Yeah. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Well, yeah, along those lines, I'm thinking, to present these proposals, for the public, just for consideration, should we take out the evaluation criteria?
Yeah,
Should just
I'm
have,
wondering that.
because that might, you know, we don't want to lead the witnesses. And, you know, we haven't normalized that, so maybe we just present the proposals as such, and not have the criteria in what we publish to the public.
Yeah.
That's really.
So, yeah, I have a few things. So one thing is, my understanding is these proposals are going to be the task force proposals, so we all have to agree on the content of each of the proposals. It's not like this is our understanding and this is, then you get an understanding and then you get an understanding. It's like all of us are putting out 3 proposals. Am I correct?
I like that, because again, it's not like we're not voting on which one we're deciding on. But
Our job is to put together
the
3
best possible 3
proposals.
proposals.
Right, so we have work to do to all agree on the science and the facts and what the words that are in each of these proposals. So I'm curious about how that gets trued up, because there's a lot of stuff in
Yeah.
these, so one.
It's an important question.
Yeah, like, I'm looking at, there are about 100 of them, and each one of these that I can think of that we need to resolve.
Right.
One comes up at the very top, is like, somebody said arsenic has to be taken off to a site, and the other one said arsenic is not a problem.
Yeah.
Now, we need to be clear as a task force, is the arsenic in the pond a problem we need to take care of and pay a lot of money to take care of, or is it not a problem? Like one of the reports said, so we just have to get to a place where we as a task force agree on all of those proposals that we're putting forth in each of these proposals, right? If we're saying,
Yeah.
oh, it's great because it's going to attract this kind of fish. Another one says it will never attract that kind of fish, so we better get our act together on these
Yeah,
Sure.
things and make
Yeah.
sure we're consistent in what we as a task force are saying.
I think that what you're saying is really connected to how Toby and I are thinking about this editorial function.
But how do we get, so you're gonna sit in a room and say, these guys said arsenic's, okay, and this guy said arsenic's, is gonna cost a lot of money. How are you gonna get us to agree?
Bring it back to you
Okay.
all. Those decisions have to be made by the task force, and our functions as facilitators is to help you get through that process.
Cause there's a lot of
We're
them.
not gonna sit and judge.
That's fine. I brought up one tiny one.
There may not be as many as you
I-
think, but I don't know, having
Okay.
not done it. So, but
Yeah.
our intention, and it could fall back.
Yeah.
But our intention is that with the two of us going through them side by side in sort of an objective way, that these kinds of things will come up. And
great.
either there'll be an obvious answer and we can come back to you and say, we think there's an obvious answer. Or here's a way to wordsmith it. But it's yours. You all will decide. And you may have, there's gonna be another process where the work groups have to convene or the whole task force.
Yeah.
I mean, in the way that you're suggesting it, Vicky, is really, I think it's really smart to be thinking about it as the whole task force owning something.
Right. And then I was gonna follow up on the whole base case additional features thing, because I do think that that's a really nice way to think about it. But I think what happens in each one of these is if we do the base case, we all have to agree what the base case is for dredging, what the base case is for dam removal, what it is. But what we have to be able to say is this base case does not meet the criteria of Envision Concord. In order to meet that criteria, we have added these additional features. I think that's the way to do the two chapters in a way. Like here's the base case for dam removal. It doesn't meet Envision Concord by these three criteria, so therefore we've responded to that with these additional features. Dredging, base case doesn't meet these three criteria for whatever it is, and we've added these features in order to do that. Maybe, I don't know, we need to find a way to say, why are we doing added features?
Or what is our base case mean? You know what I mean? Is the base case, the presentation, so to speak, the proposal plus meeting what we think meets
Envision Concord,
Concord.
but that would be different than what, so we have to get to that place where we agree on what base case we're presenting.
Yeah. This is a great question. These are exactly the things you guys should be talking about. So yeah, go ahead.
I
Jack.
think, the template of this sounds great, having you two flag, so this is an assertion.
Yeah.
We need some more here, it's clarified or whatever. The idea of the base case plus would leave us with 9 different proposals.
Yeah.
And task force in the public, well, what's the cost benefit? I can't do the calculus. So ideally, we'd have 3 proposals. Where in this group over the next month with public feedback. It's like, I like that, I think that's extraneous, we're kind of not hearing the love for that part, and slash that off, or the cost benefit is there, because that part's gonna be too expensive, whatever. I think we have to refine these 3 proposals to then weigh against those criteria. One thing that comes to mind, and Vicky said, well, why the dam removal committee has talked about trails so much, because the dam removal was like, do what EA said. I mean, we deal with that sentence. We don't go into much detail, but we have a lot of other stuff because we feel to meet the criteria, that's the proposal. We want to, create more recreational access and money. So, but I think the other 2 proposals, for example, in that criteria talk about potential for fish passage if this other thing happens. that then isn't budgeted at all. So it's like, well, we can't say this is gonna be great, you know, to have a riffling pool passage or something like that, which could be a great idea, but, without them being, you know, having that baked in. So anyways, I think we need consistency in that way. Proposals to keep working in committees and as a big group. Yeah.
Yeah,
You think we can do that in the next 2 to 3 meetings? It's gonna be a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if we've taken the pressure off a deadline.
Well, the
around
deadline
town,
is the
but let's
meeting.
not say, oh, it's April, we've got to be finished in April.
No, but there's a public meeting. We have.
Yeah.
Set the date.
But we've said like, we're gonna have public feedback, then
Mhm.
inform. So maybe we don't need 3
Mhm.
final proposals by the public meeting, but by the time we get to our internal
Yeah.
comparison process.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if the task is that, since we're not really deliberating what's the best option here. I think the task before us is look at each one. What we need to clarify, what's missing and what we need to clarify to make it sort of presentable. And I'm willing to kind of withdraw my base case, comment, because maybe it won't work.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just, let's look at the proposals and as they said, but I think clarifying and making sure they're not missing anything.
But we have to all
Supposed to.
agree on the facts in each one. That's what's gonna take time. Let's say one of them says you're gonna attract trout. If you do this, and this is not a thing, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I'm giving you an example, sorry, Malcolm, I know your heart
Mhm.
stopped. But let's just say one of them says you're gonna attract trout if you do these 3 things. And everybody else says, there's no way you're ever gonna attract trout. We have to spend a little time coming to a conclusion on whether we are going to attract trout or not attract trout through any kind of mechanism that we use. We need to spend a little time talking about that and agree on it.
so.
Yes.
One,
I can say
But-
herring, maybe that's a better one.
Yeah, if the specific examples that don't require a lot of research. Or more
There's a bunch of
dissertations
them,
from
but there's a
consultants,
bunch of them.
there's things like we can answer.
But we're gonna have to spend a little time. Someone's gonna say yes, herring, someone's gonna say no herring. How do we get to herring? We're gonna spend 15 minutes talking about it.
I think it'd be good to wait and see what comes up.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
you may very well be right, there may be a number of.
I did a little
Yeah,
exercise.
and I'm frankly about trout, I'm an old fisher, I'm a fly fisher, so I know about trout. But let's hold off on that, and let's just come across them as you come up. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the best thing.
and one thing I'll
So we
say,
get more-
like, one of the approaches that we can, and I think we'll use when dealing with some of those is. Just being clear, like, we're not saying something is true or not, we could say, you know. An expert that we consulted with, we could name them. Said this, right?
Okay.
Leave it there.
We'll see, we'll see.
Right? We're not saying it's true or not, we're just saying.
Let's see what happens.
If you say fish as opposed to trout, so.
No, we have to be very clear, because we are working to attract certain types of fish, right? Cold water
I
fish,
don't
we're
think
saying.
there's any fail success for individual species, but we've talked about increasing habitat conditions for varieties.
For certain
So
species.
just as we've spoken to a number of experts, who give us information that would allow
Yeah.
us to into a crystal ball, but we can't say by this date, this thing will happen.
So then we'll look at the language in each report, make sure it says that, because I think there's some variety in how that's stated in each of these.
So to make it more complicated, even if these are all hypotheses, if we think something's gonna happen, we don't know if it's gonna happen. Right, because there are uncertainties in everything we do, so I'm not sure we're gonna come up with the answer. The best we can do is a best hypotheses based on good assumptions, right? That's good.
You're gonna find consistency between those statements. Yeah.
Do our best, you know, well, so I think
Absolutely.
it is, you know, it would be very helpful, right, to hear from you all, right, statements that you think need to be resolved, right, or, you know, there's a factual issue that needs to be treated with care, right, and we can devote some attention to thinking through ways that may be acceptable to the group, to everyone, right, and suggest those to you. So I wonder, I mean, I think. There's an important question about base proposal add-ons, do we wanna just have 3 proposals, do we wanna have, 3+ options? Yeah.
I think that we should go through the
Okay.
proposals.
Yeah.
And then I think it will become more clear.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's go
Yeah.
through each of the 3 proposals, we'll have our discussion, and I think we'll understand better.
So I have a few things to offer to think about.
Mhm.
It's an interesting discussion. First, I think that as we look at the goal might be for this, and I think we should talk a little bit about the goal for how this is gonna be presented and what we might want for outcomes from a public meeting, even ahead of this, just so that we're kind of aiming for the same
Mhm.
level of engagement with the public. So that's one thought. Another one is, I was struck by the fairly wide range of costs, even in the relatively limited cost information that we have here. So, whenever we're talking about something that's more or less ranges from business as usual costs up to a capital project that's 7 figures. That's, how, there's the old, you get what you pay for. So obviously, the outcomes, the quantitative outcomes are going to be different. Depending on how much, how many resources are put into it. And so I think it's important that when we present the alternatives as alternatives, we're being as specific as we can about what the sort of level of effort and level of resource is that accomplishes that outcome, because I think people tend to decide on that, they're used to thinking about it. So the example that Vicky raised about something like arsenic, and let's just call it sediment. I would note that the 3 proposals have very different handling of that. In the no action case, it sits where it sits today, and presumably if you leave it alone, you don't have to do anything. Or spend anything. If you drain remove the dam and suddenly it's exposed, well, maybe that brings a certain set of issues, whereas if you dredge and then have to dispose of it or move it somewhere, then that's a different set of issues. So that's a lens that we could, there's sort of arguments about things that, how many plants are there going to be when none of the proposals are necessarily doing anything specific about plants versus the sediments are actually handled differently in each proposal. So that's kind of a lens over which to look at this, and there's probably other issues. I also think that there's some quantitative things that we might want to, I'm kind of envisioning a matrix that shows the alternatives stacked up against each other. And so, the sort of area of open water that's left at the end of a given proposal is something that might be quantified. There's going to be a certain amount of open water. If the dam is removed, a different amount of open water. If dredging occurs, and some other amount of open water if no action is taken. So I'm also thinking in terms of how to present what's a lot of information in a set of fairly easy to consume in an hour of somebody presenting and saying, these are what the choices are, and these are how the resources applied sort of affect those choices. Those are a few of my thoughts on how to do that. In addition to that, I do think that we need to focus on the shared fact set. Kind of in advance of being able to differentiate the choices in that sort of a way. The last thing I would add to that, besides the fact set and the differentiation, is I think that when we come around to actually deciding, we should think in terms of a roadmap, like how long does it take, and what are the steps to get to whatever the outcome is, which may be some hybrid of the proposals that have been developed so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, that we might be presenting these as discrete options to the public, right? But when we deliberate, it might be where we end up is more along the timeline right, that includes multiple pieces, I know we've said that before, but I think it's helpful to keep in mind.
But this, to Mark's point, the first point, thinking about. So the end of this phase, which is the public engagement phase before the final deliberation. What level we want, information we want to present, is it high level, kind of big picture, there's a lot of details in any of these. And what kind of feedback we want from the public in that, I think. So we should probably keep that in mind as we finalize this phase of proposals, how this feeds into the.
Yeah.
What we want to present to the public, what input we want from them.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for tonight, if I'm not mistaken, got it correctly, I'm trying to think what you're saying, is we're looking to look at these proposals, to make sure that they are realistic in themselves and valid in what they're trying to present. You don't have to agree with them in terms of, and whether they're internally consistent, that what they're saying is working. And then have them as kind of individual items, and we'll look at them and later on as a group to decide our own against the criteria and our own proposal how to go forward. Is that right?
Well, although I heard that you were gonna come back to us, so let me just,
Yeah.
because that's a really good question. I heard you were gonna come back to us and identify things where things aren't saying the same thing. So we're not really doing that part tonight necessarily. We're just giving general feedback on each proposal. What are we doing tonight?
I would hold off. I would say we would. If you might see something,
Mhm.
you know, I might see something, we may actually, I mean, who knows,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
brook trout, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then we could give it to them and say, look, this is a conflict.
Yeah.
Work it out for us and figure out where's the validity in this, you know?
Right.
So we have to do all of that tonight.
Well, as much as we can, as much as we can.
In our time.
And in written comments afterwards.
Written comments afterwards, so we'll do it again one more time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I was just reacting that we would give everything back. We're transparent with you about anything that we find. But coming back to the group,
So we're not finding it all tonight.
not finding it all tonight.
Okay.
You have a chance to
Yeah,
provide
That's the question. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What are we doing tonight?
Yeah, it's tonight. There are written comments after tonight, so that you don't have the pressure of providing every comment tonight. And then there would be the CBI review that could raise other questions that we would need your input on. There might be just like editorial fixes, typos, whatever. Or there could be something more, and then that would be back to the group.
Yeah.
But it sounds long, but I don't think it actually is going to be as long and potentially treacherous as you may imagine.
Liz, Heather.
Yeah.
Okay, one following, but wasn't from Google. Sorry. Going on what you were saying about where, do we think we're also spending time like looking and thinking about what people are saying in terms of how things meet the criteria, or do you think we're, so we're looking at the fullness of it, not just the like, this is kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's everything.
Since it was out there like, oh, maybe we're only gonna present the top. But so we're gonna like look at it as a whole, okay, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, great, I mean, I think we good discussion on sort of the holistic piece and what we're here to do. Let's take Chris's advice and maybe start working through some of the individual proposals. I want to hand around a document that we sent out, which is these FAQs for public outreach. And we're not gonna, dig into them in detail right now, but I'm just, if you want to actually share what these are for folks, just so there's no.
So it's a list of frequently asked questions that actually came from the Friends group. And they came up with questions that they had, they were trying to answer them, and then they're like, well, it's difficult for us to answer them. You guys, as a task force, are going through this whole process. You guys are looking into all these things. So can we share this with you and tell you, task force, this is what these are questions that we'd like to know the answer to. Can you help us with that or not? So really, that's more of what this is. And I'm thinking also that we have all put together our proposals. And so therefore, they have particular questions on dredging, dam removal, a little bit of the history and certain particular areas that, well, have we answered these questions? Does it make sense for us to answer these questions? Do we know the answers? And whether we do or know the answers or not, when we go to the public meeting, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these questions came up. And wouldn't we like to be prepared and know how to address them? So that's my thought behind this, and I think the intent of sharing this with us.
I think it's a perfect use of this, anticipating that these questions are gonna come up. So between now and then, I don't know if we have to put these in our proposals,
No.
but
No,
we have to.
I would,
Yeah.
but it's like an examine for us to go over and see, are
Yeah.
we ready to address these?
Yes.
And we just wanted to share them now in case it's helpful as we go through the proposals, if there's anything that
Yeah,
you notice that
Yeah.
would be easy to adjust.
okay.
And should we at some point answer these before the public meeting? So we have one answer, that there's not like four answers that we have one way to answer it for the public?
Wow, that's a good question, and I think that in looking at all of these, if we do have answers, I think it's something that we need to share with each other, and yes, do we agree on these or not?
Talking to people about, I would. Some people would say 75%, maybe I'd say 60% or so. Can be answered pretty easily. They're not difficult questions. Some of them are gonna be more difficult. If we did anything, we might just have a small couple of another subgroup. Try to answer them all and come back to us. And try to do it that way. Then we can argue over the last 20% or
Yeah,
30%.
yeah, maybe.
Or.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to know, I see Ben had a hand for a while, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's right now, like, all questions are good questions. I think we're at the stage where this is potentially distracting us from getting these proposals in the state where we, after that, can answer these. I like the idea of having kind of two people or
Yeah.
three people group.
Yeah.
Going through it, make the easy answers and come back to, these are the more complicated ones we have to really look at as a group.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm more interested in getting through our three proposals, getting all questions that people have on the table, and get them to a stage where we can move forward. If we deal with that now, this will come on.
I'm not saying that to sit down and answer every single question now, but I think that, you know, as you've gone through your dam removal process, do you think that you've answered questions that may come up? If not, do you think they're important to answer?
No,
I mean,
not
I think
saying they're
that's
not
really,
important, it's just the timing, yes.
but that's more of what I was inferring for that.
Yeah, you were saying something.
Yeah, I think you guys are actually somewhat aligned.
I think so.
And these
Go ahead, Paul.
are good questions. I suggest the three working groups, assuming that we're gonna meet, look at each one of these and say.
Yeah.
We think we can cover those. So if they come up during the meeting, we got this covered, then there'll be some orphan questions that maybe. I just think.
Let the see, let them handle it.
So what I want to add to that is that when, you know, like, when Chris put up those questions and putting those out there that we received, I remember way back we received them. It's like when we look around the room at the meetings that we've had and we look at the people who participated through Zoom, it's been a lot of the people who are around the pond, the people with sort of that vested interest. So I think we really need to take those questions seriously, and really thinking about it, because they're asking it in a way that says, we really don't know the answer. Do you know the answer? So I think it's a jumping off point, but we also have to be ready for the questions that are coming from sort of the non-Warner's Pond people too. And it's like, what would that projection be? We don't know that at this point. But if you really sort of look and think about that, it's like the folks who've been the most vocal, the folks, you know, the residents who've really come up and asked a lot of the deeper thinking questions, those are the people who put those questions together. Those are the people who are going to be coming asking all of the questions based on all three of the proposals, and really probably I'm guessing at the next meeting in a more in-depth way. At least that's been my experience. And, you know, kind of, as I was sitting here listening, I was thinking about sort of, you know, framing information. How do we give information? I mean, we have so much in-depth information. And I'm just thinking about the dredging group, us as a whole, and all of our learning that we found, and all the questions that we brought up as we went through this, and to get to those answers, as I'm sure each of the other groups did. How do you sort of like summarize that? You know, I'm always thinking about, when you're writing a proposal, they always want that narrative. When I've been a reader for proposals, it's been, I want to look at the narrative, I want to look at the money, and I want to look at the timeline. Three such important pieces to any proposal that comes up. You all know your town better than I do, by far. But I know that those are those sort of basic questions that, you know, I would be thinking about going into that kind of meeting. It's like, you know, how much is this going to cost us? What are the real, you know, what are the details and how long? In a summary. So that's just my thoughts. But I really think that looking at those questions, at least before we have that public meeting, is going to be an important factor, and getting to, as it was said, that precise answer that we all agree on. That's all.
All right, so let's move in now to talking about some of these specific proposals, and I want to suggest we maybe start with the no action group. So again, our purpose is to think about how can we make this better, stronger, more ready for public consumption. Are there things we want to see added, changed, amended? Right, so I can put this up on the screen. I think maybe this might not be the best place to do like wordsmithing, so I hesitate to do that, but I think overall comments.
Yeah.
Right, maybe having it in front of you all could be helpful. So, here it is. So is that coming up? I don't know that that's super visible for everyone. I can zoom in a bit. But, you know, we have a description of the proposal here and some key assumptions. Right, so anyone just pause me if you want to offer a comment on the proposal overall or what's in here. But assumptions around, you know, Warner's Pond being a cherished resource, beautification, right? So some developments and events that could impact what's possible or what should happen on the pond, including development of the row, future uses of MCI, the removal of Talbot Dam, right? Notes investments, right? Continues and notes that, you know, if nothing is done with the pond, what will happen? Yes, questions, Sam, go ahead, comments.
Yeah, so, I have a couple of questions perhaps, and I go through them, and they don't need potentially to be answered right now, but I want to bring these questions up. There were thoughts when I read through it. So one is, so the no action, literally, it's not no action, it's kind of do a little bit.
Short term.
Yeah, it's a little bit kind of a bridge to something. Yeah, building a bridge to something, that's how I read it. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but for me, the question is, first of all, how long of a bridge is it? So how much time does it actually give us? And I might have missed this in reading through it, but I didn't get a sense about how much time this kind of doing a little bit gives us. How fast are the sediments continue to build up? How bad can it get? Because we know kind of even with putting the stuff out, it's just taking a little bit out of the tip of the iceberg. So, and the timeline was something I was very interested in. How long can we bridge? Yeah. And what
Can
is,
you respond, because that's a great question,
Yeah.
and I know when we talked about it, we thought we really couldn't put our finger on how long this could be, that the process of eutrophication can change so over many years. So we don't really know, and even when we talk to people who are in the field, no one could give us an answer.
and write it down, say, we don't know how long.
I think we did, I think it's in there, but I'll have to check, it's a
Yeah.
good question, I think we put that down at some point.
Is there a
Yeah, but there's some rate of, there is some rate of sediments coming in.
It's more it's the sediment, but it's not the sediment, it isn't like the Hoover Dam where there's a lot of sand and thing. It's simply the plant life that's dying
Okay.
and building up in the bottom. So that, but, when we asked about how long will this take, even the NRC staff, there was essentially no answer about how long it would be before this would, and do what? It would just simply make a channel through the middle of the stream.
But I think you need to put some estimate on it. I mean, A, it's clear that this is not a permanent solution, it must be
Right.
clear. And B, I think we need to tell the public we estimate, we need to put some,
I think
So-
it's very challenging to provide even an estimate, because it's so variable. On conditions that we don't have. You know, a lot of information about it is storm events, it's what kind of pollution inputs from the watershed. It is essentially, I mean. When I had talked with Bill about this at some point, you can look at the progression of aerial photographs over time and you can see what is going to happen. And maybe providing a little bit more of that illustratively might be helpful. But to say how long that's gonna take, I mean, I'm not a limnologist or, a lake expert, pond expert, but. We have asked that question to a number of different people and nobody is willing to
okay,
provide.
let me give you an alternative.
Yeah.
We say that. To implement this, we'll need to reevaluate in 5 years. I mean, you can't have an open-ended proposal, say this will last forever, because it won't.
Right,
You don't know what the answer is, but you could probably say, we're proposing this for the next X years, and then we'll reevaluate the situation.
That's fine.
So,
In fact, in one draft, we did have down at some point a 5-year.
The other thing
Is it still here? I don't remember. Okay.
we alluded to the useful life of the existing dam.
Mhm.
Is you can assume that dam is a structure, it's going to, in 50 or 100 years or some time frame like that. It's going to reach its
Oh, yeah.
end of life, and then you've got to do something, you've got to either rebuild it or take it away. So recognizing that there is a man-made structure that's framing this. That establishes one thing, and we of course mentioned that a 10-year outlook needs to be maintained on that. The other thing is that because this is about more of a management plan for the pond as it is, the expectation was that there would be ongoing efforts to control vegetation, both manually, and those could be ramped up and ramped down. We spent quite a bit of time trying to run down whether or not drawdown was gonna work, and in the end established that certainly the structure that's there now doesn't do it passively. Could you add pumping or, take some other effort? You could, and those are decisions that what we tried to do was lay out a framework for making decisions to manage this process, which is, we all recognize what's going on and how effective any given action is going to be at delaying, deferring, extending the life of the pond as it is kind of is going to be subject to evaluating those actions as they take place.
Okay, but I think on the timeline, this is your
Yeah.
point.
Just,
You need
Yeah,
to put something up.
The
I think
question,
there must be something, because what I
Yeah.
hear now is anything between 6 years and 100 years.
yeah, the question
So
of
that-
what happens if you absolutely did nothing is, to Delia's point, very hard to answer. But the question is, what do if the question is, what are you gonna do and how are you gonna evaluate that? That what we're saying is try to maintain an ongoing process which annually decides what the actions are gonna be
Yeah, but
and maintains a 10-year outlook.
Yeah.
One way, I'm sorry.
Well, that's like I said, we're gonna hash out each of these issues
Yeah, no,
together, yeah.
yeah, the question is how best and efficiently do it, because some
Yeah.
stuff is related to the timeline. Yeah,
Right.
there are things that if you do it on an annual basis, then you look at investments differently, because they're more, you're just doing a lifeline on 1 year to the other. If you're looking at a 10-year or a 20-year or a 100-year horizon, then you have it in there to say, oh, what about a fish passage? Yeah.
Yeah.
There are costs associated with it.
Mhm.
If you say, okay, the cost is kind of another couple of $1 million of that, but the whole thing is only planned to be from 1 year to the other, probably not put a couple of $1 million into fish passage. If you're saying the do nothing is 10 to 15 year horizon, you might. Yeah, so the time horizon is important for all the other things you're mentioning, yeah?
Yeah.
Where, by the way, there's no cost associated, and you mentioned that's another thing, you have to have costs to make these things comparable.
Yeah, okay, so. Understand the comment. In the sections that we identified where the broad responsibilities are, so. Section C, pond management. Section D, recreation, and section E, dam maintenance. With the only one where we're specific about a time frame is the dam maintenance, and we said we maintain a 10-year capital outlook, which is consistent with the way the town normally plans. Anyway, but we could make some suggestions, I think, and, you know, make it more consistent.
You know what, also, Mark, early on, and Chris just pointed this out to me, in page, is that Chris page?
Is it the first or second?
First or second page, it's,
Second page,
second page.
life of the existing dam.
The life of the existing dam, the sentence, which probably should be in the paragraph, says this proposal assumes that this management plan should be in effect for at least 5 years. With pond health assessments, forecasts, dam risk assessments, budget outlooks put in place to determine if this is a viable approach. We could change it to say, this proposal should be reviewed no later than 5 years.
Yeah.
And that would cover a lot of the things you're suggesting. So it might be before that, because I mean, something might come up and they take down the Talbot Dam, and now we want to look at a fish ladder right away, you know? Or a fish passageway.
So I think it would help this proposal to do something where it says actions like. Fill in the blank, could delay additional interventions. You know, for this proposal, so annual, whatever, pull, annual, you know, invasive chemical treatment, whatever it's gonna be, that there's some sort of management that would prolong this proposal to a place where, you know, like, is there a scenario, to Sven's point, where this scenario could last 100 years until the dam fails? And you say, this is what you would have to do in order for those two things to align, or, you know, that we have to replace the dam, whatever it is. It would be good to know what those things might look like, because all we would be really managing is eutrophication in a way. And then if that's the case, then we would add fish passage. And I do think you should put somewhere in here, one of the reasons we're doing any of these is to help the fish population. I think each one of these needs to have a way to solve for fish.
And the cost of it.
Each one, each one of them needs to solve for that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Sorry.
Go ahead, Paul, yeah.
I think the 5 year, I think putting a reevaluation 5 years. To see what's working, to see what needs to be revised, to revisit it, to see whether we have to abandon it completely. I think that would satisfy me as far as the timeline. That this isn't permanent, but we don't have the answers.
Yeah, at least that's.
It's somewhere between experiment, yeah, it's a pilot, it's experiment. The only thing structure that I'll say on A. Is really jurisdiction, scope, you don't have the scope until D. I mean, actually scope meaning what you gotta do. Part A is real jurisdiction, and part, the scope really begins in pond management, I think, is the scope
Yeah.
meaning what you gotta do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's good.
So you might wanna have scope and then have.
So let's go to Malcolm's been waiting here.
I really struggle with this, because essentially. I may be reading that wrongly. What you're proposing is essentially what we've been doing since 2010.
I don't think so.
Looking and seeing and dabbling around the edges with a bit of, you know, weed control there and a little bit of that there. I thought this task force was pulled together to make a definitive decision about what we're going to do with the pond, not to do what we've been doing sitting around for the last 14 years. Doing. So I have a real problem with this proposal.
So,
It feels to me like it's just
yeah,
task force copying out of its responsibilities.
let me read section B, short, page 2. A key feature of this proposal is to recognize the specific responsibilities and define points of coordination to manage the intersections and eliminate gaps, thereby enabling the community to set and meet expectations. Each of the 3 major areas of responsibilities is assigned to existing committees supported by town staff. So I would suggest that what we're calling out here is that there's not been a specific set of goals set. There has been no particular mechanism whereby the accomplishment of those goals for pond management has been actually reviewed and evaluated on an annual basis. And so what we specifically call for, again, in pond management section C, is that the NRC will convene these groups on an annual basis and say, how are we doing meeting the goals that have been set for managing this resource? And that, I would submit, has not happened. And that is the major change that we're suggesting should happen, taking advantage of as many existing structures as we can. One of the alternatives that's listed down at the bottom was, should we create a whole new pond, Warner's Pond Management Task Force or committee? And we rejected that because what we're trying to say is, no, we can build this into the responsibilities of existing groups, recognizing what they are, as long as we're deliberate about how to do that. So that's where we were thinking.
Yeah, I agree. And Malcolm, if you were saying that it doesn't meet what the task force is doing, we set this group up as a no action, short-term group.
I think no action is no action. What this is it's still.
No, we actually said in our minutes, no action, short-term, that's what we all
I know
agreed to.
that, I know.
And that's what we brought before you.
And I'm fully aware of that.
So when
how
we-
are
But it's
not-
But it
how are we
isn't
not meeting what we
But that's
said
like
about-
saying dam removal shouldn't have recreation. Dam removal has other things. Dam removal, if you wanted to take it to that point, then we should have a proposal that just removes the dam and we all walk away. But that's not what we agreed to do.
I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Paul.
Suggestion is just, what you just point out,
Yeah,
what's different. Have a section, what's new, what's different. What
Right.
you say is new and different.
yeah.
To answer Malcolm's point, anybody who reviews it, what's new here? I think you take care of it pretty easily.
Yeah.
And
Because
to,
it's really not no action. No action is
No,
like,
no,
No, no.
it's specific
yeah,
pond management and
Well,
all
we're
actions.
also-
What's different?
because we had the criteria, we knew what the criteria was. We were looking to say within the frameworks that we have, what can be done to try to make progress against the criteria that we understand. And so something like changing the fish is not going to happen under this proposal because it does nothing to change the physical barrier that it's preventing the fish from doing it. So it's not an action that results in that. The other thing I think that we were aware of is we're trying to position this as what happens if you don't do either of the 2 other things. Because we have some fairly, we have specific, one group is looking at dredging, the other group is looking at removing the dam. So everything else seemed to be on the table from our perspective. Otherwise, we would literally have 3 discrete actions. And I think as a task force, we would come under the criticism of saying, okay, well, yeah, but what about these 16 other things that could have been considered? Who was covering that? So we thought that was a role that we could play.
If I could say, in a nutshell.
Jeff's been waiting very patiently. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think in any of these complex decision-making processes that we'll ultimately get to, we need that base case, because people will say either of the dredging and dam removal involves significant expense, staff time, coordination, et cetera. why are we doing out of those? And so I think it's important we lay out sort of this minimal piece against our criteria and say, well, as you guys did, this misses on business. And so I think, along those lines of minimal investment in situations what we all discussed, to have this committee do. One specific comment I'd have, getting back to the comment I made earlier, is having the fundamental proposal and not the additions, the speculative additions, like referring to investigating fish passage, like that could happen, there's a lot of stuff that could happen, but it's sort of not a fundamental outcome of the proposal. I guess that's one example of it.
Right, and except for examining what I would consider to be whether or not the existing dam was capable of being, more actively used to manage vegetation, which I think was a very reasonable question. We were completely silent on how much does it cost to do a fish passage or, what
But isn't
about.
that, like, it was listed as a potential item, and then in the criteria,
Yeah.
Fish passage was, sure, if there was a.
If you wanted that. Yeah, if you wanted to do it later or something, but that I think, and I would make this comment about all of the proposals is, I think everybody talked about it at some level, and we could just set it off to the side and say, that's a discrete capital project that could be done or could not be done.
Right, in any of them, yeah.
Okay, so I see Vicky, Sven, and Malcolm, so we'll go in that order.
So I think the other thing that would help here is there have been management plan reports that have been done, we paid for them. It would be good in the very beginning to say, we've had these 2 management plans, they've come up with clear management recommendations for the town. And this plan follows each of those and adds some things to it, because I think for people who don't know, a lot of these things have been proposed in management plans that we have requested and engineered and paid for, so it would be good for us to at least reference those in the very beginning.
What's highlighted there is, I think, what we said about that.
But I think it should be right in the beginning, we should say this is grown out of this idea that we manage the pond, right? That's what started this no action scenario, is that ponds can be managed. We've paid for these engineers to give us these recommendations, and here's what this says, and here's what we recommend we do.
Yeah.
Right, I think with Sven, you were next, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of come back to the picture of, is this a bridge to do something? Or is this final or super long-term solution? And if you think about the bridge picture is right now, this reads a bit like a bridge to nowhere. Yeah, which can be fine, but the moment you make decisions about the additional features, how we call them, let's say the fish passage, which most likely is the most expensive part, but also if you're building additional kind of access or improving access, you're investing into something where the bridge goes. So from my thinking, I would assume a fish passage only, you would invest as a town only if you accept and say, okay, the bridge is to something where the dam is there for the next 100 years. And that's what we are planning to, and therefore we are putting more money into a fish passage. So in that thing, so you make capital investments along the way, over and above the maintenance of it, you're already starting to guide the town to say the long-term solution where this bridge is ending. And therefore, I think it's important to understand the moment you're mentioning fish passage, and the same as for the other thing is, you need to know the cost of that. Is this something major that would then define the solution? Because the last thing you want to do is kind of 10 years from now, Massachusetts comes, and that's another thing is that's not in this. But assume Massachusetts comes in 10 years, that we want to get rid of the dam, and we just invested in a fish passage, we are destroying money. So that's the other part I have in my list is, are we expecting Or is there a scenario where Massachusetts might force us to take the dam down, no matter in what kind of shape the dam is? And we haven't really, neither as a full group nor the subgroups, at least what I see here in these reports, touched that thought is we have to get rid of the dam at a certain point because Massachusetts wants it.
Yeah, let's respond. I think, I understand, Sven, about taking out under the project annual cost, where it says researching, analyzing the possibility of a fish passage, because it skews us right towards that part. That is no, I have no problem with that at all. That makes sense to me. One thing though is, I think if you ask me, what is this a bridge to nowhere? It's simply saying, here are the things you can do to maintain for an indeterminate number of years. And that's okay, all right? And I don't think it has to be a bridge, it can just be that indeterminate number of years. If something comes up, you'll be in a good position to face into it with this construction. I will say, I think the main thing, looking at what Paul had asked, this proposal is making, is forming the links for communication. Mark had said this, between the various groups, between recreation, between the Natural Resources Commission and the Natural Resources staff, with the Friends of Wonders Pond, ORS is mentioned in here. It's suggesting that there'll be regular interaction between those groups. Maybe the creation of pond stewards. That's the idea, is so our eyes don't wander from the pond. I think that's the main thrust, and that's where I think it should go. But I think you're right. I hadn't realized before how that was skewing it, at least on my part. I can see that now.
So we got a couple more hands. Malcolm was next in the queue, then we'll go to Liz and Paul.
I appreciate you pointing out in your B and C, because I actually couldn't understand B, so it seems to be rather jargon. So explaining it really helpful.
Okay.
So that helps to understand the differentiation. And I want to say, I really like the idea of stewardship, and that's something that should be done no matter what happens. I think that's a tremendous side. I think the thing that is really missing from this is any sort of cost, because as Jeff said, I've had the experience of my next door neighbor. When I asked him just sort of casually, what do you want? What do you think about Warden? He said, oh, of course we should keep it. And I said, well, it's going to cost $3 million. And it's, oh no, in that case, just forget it. I don't want to do anything. And we should understand what are the costs to doing nothing, or something as you've described here. We need to be able to understand that not doing anything isn't free.
And Malcolm, are you specifically talking about like the financial costs of what we know about the financial costs of the maintenance?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Implementing
so what
this.
you're proposing here, I mean, there are real costs involved in having different offices coordinate. You've mentioned all sorts of things like you're monitoring and reducing invasive vegetation. What are the costs behind that? There's a lot of things here that I think just it would help.
Yeah, it occurs to me too that partially because of this discussion is that we probably as a task force need to decide whether or not the pond is in a condition where simply maintaining that pond is meeting the community's needs as it stands. I think you could argue that the community has previously decided that it wasn't, but otherwise it wouldn't have voted for dredging and so forth. And so just sort of continuing to do what little, what has been done in the past and has had relatively little effect on it may be considered to be a solution that doesn't actually meet what the community wants to see in the first place. Community may have already voted for change. So I think we need to engage that question in a way that I hadn't thought of until just a few minutes ago.
Great.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Because I guess the other question that I have is, so the pond has been there. We have paid for a company, PARC Park, I believe, or PARE to come in and to, you know, take a look at the dam every 5 years. So clearly we're paying a cost for that. They have made suggestions on things to do to fix the dam, to maintain it, to keep it running. I don't know where that stands. I don't think between the one report and the next report, if much was done. We're currently having people, mow the lawn out there to maintain the dam. I mean, where is that money coming from? I'm assuming it's coming from DPW. I'm assuming it's coming from the various town entities because it is a town entity. And I would think, maybe I'm totally wrong, but it would be within the town's budget of each particular department. I mean, maybe that's naive. I don't know.
I can respond. I can respond to
You'll
that.
respond on this, and I want to just do a little status check. Go
Sure.
ahead.
So anything that is to do with the maintenance of the
Right.
dam, the inspection reports, the maintenance itself.
Right.
Is covered by operating costs and covered in CBW's budget. Anything to do with management of the pond itself, so the natural resources staff, with and without volunteers since the eighties, has dedicated time to go out and pull water chestnuts, and that's something we build into our budget, that's something done with the summer crew. There was herbicide treatment that was done. That was a capital, actually, it wasn't a capital cost, I don't remember exactly what it was, but that was a one-time, it was not necessarily built into the operating budget, so it depends. I mean, the standard maintenance that is done, it's standard is part of operating costs.
And from Public Works, so Public Works is refining and improving the maintenance plan for the dam based on the feedback of this year.
So then how do we incorporate something like that in this?
Yeah, but that needs to be kind of as an ongoing cost somewhere reflected. The one thing I think that is also it's also not expressed, but a looming issue on the dam is security in terms of security of the people who fish there. And right now, the dam design is not safe that someone is potentially falling into this specific kids. And that's a concern from Public Works, that if the dam continues to stand, there needs to be some kind of a investment in making that more secure, or fencing off the dam in totality and not allowing fishing.
Right. So I see, we've had Liz and Paul and the queue, and I get to you. I just want to suggest we have, a lot of the three of these to go through. I want to make sure we have just as much stamina by the time we get to the last one as we do now to get good suggestions.
How late are we going?
Yeah. So we're planning to go to 8:30.
There's no way we're getting.
Yeah.
through
So, well, we're gonna do our best. I want to remind you, you can also send in.
If we stop now, we could spend half an
comments
hour
if
on
we don't
this.
get-
Each one, so there's no way.
All right, so Liz and Paul, go ahead.
To be realistic.
Very, forget them all at once. So in the pond management section, talk about consulting with a pond and lake management firm. I think, I read that, I was like, we've done this 100 times already, so I think it would be really great if we could illuminate how it would be different than the other times we've done this. I assume some of it's gonna be around, you mentioned recreation, I'm like, again, great, sweet. The other thing, so under the Durham Park recreation activities, you have a line around collecting the baseline recreation and usage data. I started.
Where are you at, Liz? I'm
Liz, what
sorry.
page are you?
Page 4,
Page
D4.
four.
I drew little hearts and stars around collecting the baseline data. I think that's actually a great strength of this proposal, is that this is a really great time to collect all the sort of interesting baseline data to inform things. And so I think that might be something that you can kind of pull out as like a great thing about this proposal. The last thing I have is just around the dam maintenance, because I know it comes up in the dredging proposal. It's worth talking about, the reclassification of the hazard of the dam. I think that's happens.
The other one does this one.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. Paul, go ahead.
Mark, I'm struck by what you said at the end there, reflection, whether this is what the public expected or voted for. I think if the word improvement isn't part of it, then the proposals, I don't know if it's a viable proposal. I mean, and maybe the management actions in there are improvement, or at least holding back the ecological dam from, further degradation. But I think if you just can't explicitly state that this is part of improvement, or hold off degradation, I think.
Yeah.
It's difficult to consider it.
Right, and I think that that's probably a reasonable question for us to handle when we think about how to frame these proposals. Because if there are some objectives that we say, if the proposal doesn't accomplish some level of improvement for the value of this resource, if it's actually already depleted beyond what the town is gonna find acceptable, then we should really not call it no action, but we should call it an attempt through actions other than dredging and dam removal to address that deficiency. So, and I think that would help us frame the question that Malcolm is asking, is why is this a no action proposal that proposes to do things? And that's a fair question.
You still have the heading, no action will.
Right.
It needs
Yeah.
to change.
I know, we like
That's
that
gone.
It needs the bureaucracy that we're trying to establish.
These are difficult people, that's what it is.
So I wanna just take a stab at naming, I think, some of the key headlines that I've come out of this, and invite anyone else who has additional feedback, please send in written comments. We have heard, an interest in clarifying, why we can't say more about the timeline. Right, maybe not explicitly that we'd like to, but we tried and we can, and here's why. I think there is something in there about reviewing it within 5 years, but we need to maybe build out that language around the review within 5 years. So it's not just an annual thing. Clarify what's different about this compared to the status quo, right? Pulling that out. Right, explain why we did this and why it's more than doing nothing, right? Why it's not just doing nothing. This gets to your point, Paul, that you just named at the end. Being more explicit about the history of management plans and how this builds on that higher up in the document. And adding more cost information as much as we possibly can about even costs that reflects the status quo, or what can we put in there to really be clear and apples to apples in how we're treating costs. So those are some of the big headlines. I think that's all very helpful. Again, additional feedback, please be emailed. But let's now move on and talk about the dredging route. Okay, so obviously switching gears now. I can pull it up, if that'd be helpful. And same purpose here. What can or should we want to recommend about this proposal to make it ready to go for the public, to make it as clear and helpful for them to give us the kind of feedback we want. So floor is open on how to improve this proposal, and I'm happy to pull it up and go through it with it on the screen. So we have the 3 alternatives, and then details on those, a background section here, details on the specific proposal and how the group has proposed using the North Fields, maps of the North Fields, right? Some assumptions, right? Explaining how they're going to use StarMet location, and then here's the image of the different dredge areas. Okay. And then the information on the cost estimate, which of course came in since the last meeting and is included in the appendix. And then detail some of the expert consultations and rejected proposals, and then of course the criteria. Yeah, Jeff, please go ahead.
A lot of great information in there. Just a few points of clarification that I think would strengthen the proposal. There's, in my read, still a little bit of uncertainty about the capacity of storage in the North Field based on, and it's clear in saying there's uncertainty, but based on the, areas needed for staging, truck storage, et cetera. The depth, that the water table that could be excavated, the interest in soil, we were to excavate further to make room for more dredging. The idea that soil could be used as star net or something like that. So it's good that conversations have been had, but it's still a little bit uncertain here. And then there was a comment in the.
Can I just ask, what are you suggesting? I mean, given the uncertainty, that they try to provide more clarity on that, or?
In which part, I guess, Jeff, do you know which piece?
I'm looking primarily at page 4. Point 3, for example, better understanding of this is needed. It was assumed that any, I mean, we have the estimate of the volume in the field from the A, it's very helpful. We have 3 specific numbers. That's very helpful, but even in the EA memo, it says something that's cryptic to me, and folks could illuminate. It says this is a sort of a subtraction, slice and dice GIS analysis, but that's not the same as the volume that would be used by excavator, the dredged material. So anyways, I'm feeling the need for a little more clarification to make sure that the capacity exists. There was another line that left a question in my mind, page 2. That the sediment could be deposited in an unrestricted location. Pending sediment samples to confirm materials are clean, so that would be good to chase down as much as we could, or have a contingency if we thought that fields are not clean. There was. Okay,
Just on the sediment, as we are on it. And I brought this up before. In the proposal, you're saying it is there, and then there would be future agriculture purposes of the fields. The moment the fields has future agricultural purposes, we have to take into account that this material could potentially have a lot of PFAS. And I've mentioned that before. We know the water has a lot of PFAS. So the sediment could have a lot of PFAS. We know Maine is the state where PFAS and agricultural fields is limited, and a lot of farms have closed down because of that. So if the plan is to deploy that on a field that is later used, we at least have to take in the sampling, we have to test for PFAS and compare it to the Maine legislation, because we can assume sooner or later that Maine legislation will trickle down to Massachusetts. But I brought it up, I think, twice before, and this is key. The whole proposal, and the cost of this proposal lives on that we are putting it on a field that is later used again. And that needs to be tested.
So then the recommendation is to add language in the proposal that specifies the need to test for PFAS or consider, right?
And compare PFAS levels to
consider,
to what is out there right now in Maine, because there is a risk that in a few years from now, PFAS in agricultural land in Massachusetts gets similar limits, like we know from Maine.
So where are they getting their water that has no PFAS in it for agriculture?
Sorry?
Where do people now get water for agriculture that has no?
No, it's
PFAS?
not, it's not. So the
It's not the
problem
water.
with the sediments
No, I mean, but where do you get water without PFAS in it to water these fields?
No, it's not
Moving
coming,
future.
the PFAS in most of these agricultural fields is not coming from the water. In the agricultural fields it's coming from exactly that the
Existing
farmers
dirt.
get stuff sold that are sediments out of other uses, and these sediments have a lot of
Fertilizer.
PFAS. Fertilizer, they
Oh,
use stuff
sewage,
as a
sewage.
fertilizer. There's a high concentration of PFAS in there. It's at the moment just an assumption, we know the water of Niagara Pond has a lot of PFAS, we know there's most likely more PFAS in the water when it comes down to water pond.
Yeah.
So far, it doesn't matter because Massachusetts isn't, we're not using it drinking water, and Massachusetts is not limiting PFAS in agricultural fields. It's just significant risk that we are generating a field. Yeah,
I understand that, and those are really good points. But I also am of the understanding that the soil will also filter some of the PFAS out. And I think that field, and Jeff can probably help me out, that I don't know if he's planning on, I don't know if they're planning on any,
Expanding the field.
expanding that for agriculture. He wants the topsoil put back on. Is it gonna go towards, Route 2 expansion? Is it gonna be towards, farming? I mean, I think that's down the road quite a bit.
page 4.4.
Yes, I know what we say. Yeah, I know what we said.
Maybe you could change the language.
Yes.
I think it's reasonable to test for PFAS. I think it also, we have to talk with Jeff, it's reasonable potentially to restrict that land, so it would be used for agriculture,
Sure.
and then, so.
And this is not just a northeastern issue. I mean, there are farms in Texas.
It's all the country.
that are being shut down.
No, Maine is just ahead of
It just-
everybody else.
Right, but that's mainly because they're using our sewage with all the PFAS.
I think it sounds like we can add language around testing the PFAS and ensuring that this isn't gonna be a risk to the project, right? Right, I think I said Jeff.
Or restricting use.
I just wanted to clarify something. PFAS cannot be removed by soil.
Exactly.
There are very, very limited ways to remove PFAS from water, which is one of the reasons that it's such a concern and a threat. In this comment about the PFAS testing, I understand that you want testing, like the suggestion is made to have testing as part of the proposal, but I wasn't sure, both Sven and Jeff, if you were also saying, because you're way down there, are you saying that you thought there was another like cost issue about the field?
Yeah, for me, it's either the field might have a future restriction. Which I think should be transparent to the field owner in that sense. Or the material needs to go somewhere else if the field owner doesn't want to take the risk. And that drives the cost up.
So that the field could be unavailable.
Yes.
For agriculture.
For
agriculture.
So the question is, Jeff, is that a restriction they're willing to live with?
Right,
And if it's not, then we have to test it.
so I saw it, Jeff,
Just
yeah.
a couple more points, then I'll try to zip it on this one. Related to sediments and excavation of the North Field, 0.8, I think I'm on page 4 says. When excavating material in the North Field, gravel base is required to remain mixing with dredge material. I don't question that, I don't understand it, so just a little bit of clarification there would be helpful. I really like seeing the pool riffle plan, it's an interesting approach, etc., but that should be costed out, maybe I missed that should be in there. And.
Thank you. Yeah, Malcolm, go ahead.
Yeah, I just 2 points. First, right on the very first page, we're using 4,470 cubic yards of dredge sediment to create an emergent wetland. Why? It's an acre of, I mean, it's a tiny portion of the pond. Why are we doing it, first of all? then, I think to echo what Jeff said, it's very nice talking about the riffles and everything, and the proposal takes credit for installing the riffles and improving fish passage, but it doesn't actually include any plan to build the riffles or budget. So I think that does need to be corrected. And I'm a little puzzled by the statement that we're going to go from 9 feet of sediment removal to 12 feet. But we're only excavating exactly the same amount that was predicted in the previous.
Where are you, Nicola?
Right, so you're
Sorry,
looking,
where does it say that? So we're on page 2. In the first paragraph, it says we're targeting a 12-foot dredge for this new proposal. The original dredge plan was developed to achieve a 9-foot dredge. So that is, a lot of additional sediment. But the proposal is to dredge the same amount of sediment as was in the previous proposal. So what's happened to that 3 feet of, sorry, you got an answer.
Well, do you?
Just all the answers.
No.
You were on that committee, so.
Respond to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Delia.
So the proposal was changed from 9 feet to 12 feet because we met with Adam Burnett from the Army Corps, who was the project manager for dredging the project in Milford. And they in Milford dredged 12 feet, and that's the ideal depth.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Right, so 8 feet is the minimum, we had done 9 feet in the original proposal, but thought that 12 feet was a better idea because it would last longer. So that was that idea. And the graphics haven't changed, because this is also conceptual. Then the question about the acre plus or minus of the wetlands. So that was also in the original proposal, and
I forgot.
yeah, and it's a little bit less sediment that has to get removed. So there's a cost benefit to that, with the addition of creating the emergent wetland is a very high value wildlife habitat compared to the open water condition. So there was sort of twofold where we thought about that from the initial proposal. And really what we wanted to try to do would be what we call the base bid. The first alternative was to keep it as close to the original proposal as possible, so that we had some ability to compare apples to apples between the restricted location that was in the original proposal versus the unrestricted that we're considering as part of this proposal.
Right, so
It's helpful, yeah, so it's been a Vicky and it's been.
like, two things. One, I think this,
I'm sorry, I think there's still a little additional, so the additional 3 feet between the 9 feet and the 12 feet would be part of that 35,000 yards, essentially. So the dredge
So you must be
footprint
narrowing.
little smaller.
Right, okay,
Yes.
that's.
Yeah, and we can clarify that.
This is a highly conceptual graphic.
That is highly.
Yes.
Yeah, no, but that's important.
It's the same, isn't it the same as was in the?
That's,
original?
has not changed.
Yeah,
So we
So
would just
that's-
say, we would just say that it would be reduced to some degree to accommodate that additional 3 feet.
so you should clarify that.
Right.
So I have two things. One is I think this stepped pool diagram, which is super helpful, especially if you do the costing, seems like a much simpler solution to fish passage than some of the fish passage scenarios we've been looking at, and maybe it should be included in the no action scenario instead of a true fish passage as the way to get the fish resolved. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Anything, because we're.
I know,
supposed to
I know.
be, yeah.
I know, but I think
I see your point,
it's a
yeah.
scenario that we
Much
can
better.
talk about if we're doing fish.
Yes, I
If we're
agree.
solving for fish, it may be the one thing that we put in both. It seems super simple, given what we have out there. Like
I
this
agree.
is a bunch of almost like rocks, but. And the other thing is, I wanna have a question about, you're saying 12 feet is ideal. Love that, but is there a scenario where we just say 9 feet is acceptable? It'll do what we mean to do. It will cost us less. Cause a lot of this is doing like what we need to do to make it acceptable. Not doing everything, even the dam removal, like when we're doing the dredging of the channel, we found ways to make it.
Right.
The minimum we can do to make it acceptable. It's not what we would do. if we- Dreams.
And the depth is almost.
Okay, so that would be helpful. Maybe clarify that. More than we make it work. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go to Sven and Bill. Go ahead.
So when I read this, at a certain point, I started saying, okay, these are actually three proposals. With the cost ranging from a bit more 5 million to 12 million, just under dredging. Again, the cost of additional things is not priced. The big solution is not priced. Maintaining the ongoing maintenance is not there, like what is needed for ongoing maintenance, nor the cost of maintenance of the dam is not priced out. Access improvements are promised as there will be ADA access to the pond, then there need to be price and saying, what is it? Or the Vicky was always saying, we cannot promise what we don't have price or can deliver. So it has to be taken out. So the thing is, in the end, is for me at the moment, I see there's a minimum cost line of $5 to $12 million plus. And we don't know what the plus is. And that needs to be clarified. And it would be good, instead of putting three scenarios, I'll just say, what is the scenario, the one thing you as a group recommend? Is it the 5 million? Is it 12 million? Or is it the one in the middle? Which direction you want to go?
The history on the three alternatives, when we started out, we thought that having Northfield would be a real huge cost savings. So we want to be ambitious in putting together proposals before the cost came in. So that's why this is still alternatives. If we knew then what we knew now, it might have been just one proposal, so.
We can change that.
You can change that.
Yeah, that's actually that was my point. I was checking out. I thought, why have the three now? We'll probably already come back with one. Maybe it's 50,000, I don't know, but you know, something, it's, I don't know.
The last piece of information that came in was the cost.
Yeah, right,
it came in like
exactly.
days ago,
Exactly. Yeah, I understand that entirely. And that, therefore, if you're, let's say it's just for the sake of saying 50,000 cubic yards. The place where you take it out may be very different from what you have on
That's
this map too.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, none of those three things may fit where you're taking out that fit, right? Because you may decide not to have it by the Giroux property. You may not
Or you
need it.
do a channel near Commonwealth Avenue, or
something,
whatever,
yeah,
yeah.
whatever
I mean,
it is.
There would have to be an analysis done and find out.
Yeah, where that's going, where it's gonna be. I think it'd be stronger to be back with one rather than three.
So, I mean, I think great to raise this, and I think it brings up a couple of questions that I think we should think about and look for your folks' opinions on. We agree better to have one, right? Three, right? Folks agree with that. Do we want the work group to come back about it and suggest one, or do we want to try to sort that out ourselves?
I would prefer the work group to do it. They're the ones who
Yeah.
understand all the details of it.
We're gonna have to revisit that,
Yeah.
because the one may not be the lowest.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right.
You're making
Whatever it
recommendations.
is, you know,
Yeah.
You're the ones who.
We
do it
don't
now.
assume- I mean, we should assume it's gonna be.
Right.
35,000,
No,
because I
I-
mean, that's satisfying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in fact, maybe what Vicky suggested, maybe it's the larger area, but smaller depth. I don't know. It's up to you.
Because we now have information on what the channel is going to do, that's what we've been working on, and we should give that to you, because we have it, obviously, Delia, so that maybe you focus on supporting the channel and making sure Commonwealth Avenue access and David Owen, you know, the South Island has access. Maybe that's where the dredging has to really focus. If we're limiting it to the 50,000 cubic yard or whatever it's gonna be, then we really focus it on where we need it to be at the end of the day.
I don't want to preempt, which dredging did you have in?
I don't think we did a cubic yardage, so I don't know how we are coming up with our costs either, so.
And that's in the dredging in your proposal?
Yeah, we have dredging in our proposal.
We talked about channel alignment. Sort of, I looked at some channel restoration lines in other some of the proposals.
Be
We're
removal,
talking
just
about-
be-
Sorry,
I mean, we're not talking about dredging, we're talking about excavation.
Channelization, yeah. got it.
So that we can use your, whatever you call it, the front end. Before, yeah,
But
that's
that
true.
then would excavate, I'd say those are synonyms, but that material, yeah, we need to find a new one.
So we would have to test that again. So we would have to test it the same way that
Yeah.
the dredge material, so we have to add that.
Well, I don't think it needs to be off-site.
Oh,
We-
okay.
Yeah.
We have to figure that one out. All right, we have to figure that out.
So any more comments on the dredging work group for now?
Could I just ask a question about the table you have up on there? Why is there a not applicable for the Mass DMA? For fish, the minimum pool width and the minimum pool length?
Because those are not specified in their guidance document. They don't actually provide a number.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
So just a further question on that. So there's this question about the Warner's Pond's. The length of the auxiliary spillway is 75 feet and the dam height is 5. So. How does that relate to the natural fish lift with 10 pools? Like, is that supposed to give us some idea of whether or not this would fit in this, like, given the,
Show the, lift drawing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my question is if we're having 17-foot pools, which each have 2 feet of depth and accomplish 6 inches of lift. Is there enough space between Commonwealth Avenue and the top of the spillway to build such a thing? Like, do you, like, in terms of linear feet, like, you need 170 feet to do that? And there's only 75 feet. I was trying to understand how to read that to.
Like, does it have to be 10 feet between each one?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 feet between.
Think about the feasibility of even trying to do this in the, you know, in this space that's available. Did you guys have a thought about that?
Why don't you ask a hard?
So just for,
Could I just ask a point of clarification here? Mark, are you talking about fish passage design?
Yes,
This design
so-
right here.
Yeah, this design is in this proposal.
Why? Because we consulted with Brad Chase. And I did not recall that he made any specific recommendations about designs. I just, I guess I'm throwing this out here as a caution that maybe going down the pathway of
Yeah.
actual design, it's, as he said, it's premature and all he could really.
Yeah, but
offer
the large point is feasibility. Is it feasible
Is it
without design?
Yeah,
I
This,
think,
this proposal makes a proposal.
I think that's we need to at least say
Yeah.
feasible.
And it's significant in your proposal, I mean,
Yes.
in this proposal, because you're talking about dam removal and you wanna make room for a fish
Right.
passage. It
Talk
seems to
about-
me it's definitely part of your.
Dredging.
So this is dredging.
I mean dredging,
Yes, I knew you
It's
did.
definitely
I knew
part
you
of
did.
dredging.
You know, to give a sense of
Okay,
what
I
that
just,
type
I
of.
was out of context, I mean, that's.
yeah, I mean, I assumed that because all this information about this particular design was in there, that somehow there was a sense that maybe that would be feasible as an add-on to that. And so I was trying to, you know, decode the table to understand whether that was, because otherwise I didn't understand what the, you know, how. It looks like you need 5 feet, which I think means 10 pools because there's 6 inches of lift in each pool. If I'm right about that, then, you know,
Yeah,
So we can look.
so it sounds like this advice here, right, on the fish passage is, you know, we need to be clear that, you know, if we're putting this information in the report, this is kind of conceptual, there has not been design work. We can share what we learned from Brad Chase, and obviously we also shared an email with you that did give some information about potential costs. We can share what we know about that, and the feasibility of design, and be transparent and say, that's what we know, we don't know more than.
Yeah,
that.
and I want to be clear, none of these are designed, like, we're talking about, you know, restoring a channel, we haven't designed a way to do that. We've been talking about, you know, putting, soil on the edge of the island, there's no design for how that works. The design on a lot of these, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
mm,
So
This is a
there's-
proposal,
It's how do we share that in a way that is not misleading?
That's right. on all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanna, again, suggest, additional comments, let's send them in via email, unless there's a burning one, and Julia, let's see, have a burning. So
I do
I'll
have a burning
give you that
one.
chance. Go ahead.
In the proposal, we did suggest that there might be a need to obtain a second cost estimate.
Yes.
And
right.
so it would be helpful to
Good.
hear thoughts from the task force on that.
I think you ought to, it would, I mean, because I know the first was a bit of sticker shock, I think, and I think even though the second one may be as well, it won't be a shock. At least, it may confirm what we have in the first one, I think it'd be a good thing, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
It was some because of costing, having the extra qualification, I think you're gonna get something mildly different, you're gonna get something similar, we'll give you a little bit of a gut.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to know.
Yeah.
We should be, some big questions still out there. We need to know. So I think you're right. I think we will.
So do we
You wanna vote?
wanna vote on this?
We voted last time.
Well, this is.
For the second.
Oh, for the- Oh, I see.
Okay, so why don't we, somebody want to make a motion for that? Liz?
I move that Reading be authorized to go get a second cost estimate on their proposal. Actually, I have a point of vision for it, because you guys, is there a difference in the cost to get the cost?
Yeah.
If you do the 3 versus the 1, if you think you might end up only proposing 1, it might make sense to only ask for 1 if there's a significant cost difference. If there's not, I'd say just, sorry.
Well,
Did that make
Yeah,
sense?
so-
I talked myself into a circle there.
So do we just want to do one?
Would it be a?
No,
One.
I see what you're saying.
Sorry.
I don't think
That's
that,
the cost.
I would ask you, does it really matter? I mean, we have a cost estimate to enable them to give us a cost
I
estimate.
mean, I think I would suggest
What
that
did
it's
the task
probably
force
best to get
authorize
the
before?
3.
Oh,
It's for consultants.
That way, apples to apples, we can see.
Yeah,
But it's a different.
35,000.
So that's,
Mhm.
it is, we had asked for, it was the money we had previously, I thought was to investigate something else. I don't remember what it was.
That wasn't for the cost estimate?
I don't think so.
Do we,
Was it?
I don't,
I didn't hear the question.
What did you guys ask for?
The
You asked money for
15,000.
something for the.
Oh.
For the debt.
Well, anyway, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. We've spent, some.
Um,
But now you have a
because
motion.
the cost estimate went up to 15.
Did
But
we-
It's just, I mean, I think it's.
Fine.
it's within, it's still.
Yeah,
within
second,
that
yeah,
amount.
cost
It's within
estimate.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start that all over again,
Second.
now, talking myself in a circle. I move that the dredging group be authorized to get a second cost estimate on the capacity, 3 different quantities of sediment like to remove.
Or just-
So
but
sorry.
I said
I second it.
Just that the dredging group proceed with that.
Proceed, yes,
Yeah.
thank you, sorry.
So now we need to take a vote. Ricky?
Aye.
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 Oops, sorry.
So just one other burning
We're-
comment.
guys,
is-
Keith
and- Folks online.
Oh,
Keith and David are online.
David?
Bruce, oh no.
This is Keith. Aye.
David?
David?
David. Yes. David, are you with us?
Looks like, no. Oh, yes, he's still there. Okay, well,
Maybe he's
we can ask him for his vote later.
multitasking.
Okay, you seconded it?
Yeah.
I did, yeah. So other burning, how are we doing costing generally between all these groups? Cause I'm hearing different ways people, like dredging group has a real number. How lucky are you?
Well,
Yeah, it's a cost estimate, but from a outside source, it wasn't pulled together from online here and online there and online there, like, it wasn't done.
Same with the
like-
dam removal. Right.
Well, dam removal, we did some of our own investigation for some of the numbers,
We have the 1.1, yeah, and then we did,
but we filled in a lot of stuff by doing research.
I think the.
How do people wanna handle that?
Yeah.
Potential request.
We went like, yeah, we went,
Let's,
yeah.
we get feedback on our proposal, we can
Yeah.
see what the gaps are and maybe.
but I wanna know,
we need
the
more
whole
info.
task force, how we wanna handle those things, like, are we okay with that?
Doesn't really depend on what you're asking. I mean, it would have been possible to get a cost estimate on the dredging
Yeah.
Unless we went to a cost estimate. for that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, so one group, we're doing a cost estimate
Right,
from an outside group. Another group, we have a $1 million number from EA for the dam removal piece. All of the other things in that proposal, we're doing research on our own to find numbers and filling it in. Like, that to me is two different ways of getting a final.
Just to clarify, it's a number from Sunco, from saying, cost estimating
Right.
for the dam removal, but I think
Yeah,
what
I'm
we
sorry,
heard is that there's information
Yeah.
that, the task force is suggesting there's additional cost estimates be provided, that I don't think they're going out for cost estimates, but
Yeah.
something like dam removal or dredging, where you really need to have a cost estimate or a contractor prepare those costs.
But what about like stabilization of a channel? So many linear feet of channel, digging and.
And some of them is gonna
stabilization.
have to be just best guesses, because we don't have designs
I know,
for these things, so I think we are going to be having to be tasked with, providing the best estimate that we can, and backing that up with the assumptions that went into.
I just know from my work.
Yeah.
That we can be off by 100 to 200% when we estimate.
If you,
That's a big number to go out to the town.
if there's if the source of your estimate, you said you went online. So just cite the source.
Yeah.
I don't know, just cite-
Yeah, it's in there. It's
Okay,
in there.
then that's fine, as opposed to,
mostly
yeah, that's good.
job contracts
Yeah.
the contractor
As long as you cite the source.
So I think
Yeah, but the question is not how, say, what we did, but also what now everyone else.
Everyone's going to do.
Because everyone
make
else has these
equalize.
additional
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they're claiming credit for, that are not priced out.
Mhm.
So what Vicky was right, so pushing us very hard, that whatever we promise, there must be a dollar amount behind it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's why we think it's like, if you wanna make these things comparable, more or less, either whatever some group is promising needs to have a dollar amount behind it, even if it's a guesstimate. Or it has to be taken out.
And it has maintenance, so we have to add maintenance costs to ours. If everyone's adding maintenance costs, we all have to add maintenance costs, annual cost for these
It's all
things.
fair.
You have a maintenance
We have
plan
to-
in it, you have a maintenance plan.
Yeah, so we have to just get to the same, like, what are we pricing?
Vicky and Paul are making, I think the suggestion is, let's be very clear
Mhm.
where that is coming from, and, if we wanna say a word about uncertainties related
We
to that.
should say
We should be
something.
clear about
I
that.
think that's the uncertainty. I mean, if you're $2.5 million, bottom line could be 6 million. We want to know about, but the
Yeah.
uncertainty is plus or minus, whatever you say. I mean,
Look, dredging did it that way. They went out to other contracts in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And got a number of 3 point something, then we went out to get an estimate and it came in at 5, the same exact thing. Using online research, it was 3 point something, and then it came in at 5. If you remember when Keith did his review using bids from other projects earlier, that math, which is kind of what we're using that kind of math, it could be off. How do we make sure everyone's clear?
I think that we were using,
What's that, sorry?
I don't think we were using Keith's number, he presented.
She's saying.
You're seeing it as dynamic.
No, as a methodology, that we're using that same similar methodology.
I'm not sure I see those
numbers.
as quite the same, but I'm
Okay.
not sure that it sounds like we're sort of talking about the dam removal.
No, I'm saying
Sure,
everybody.
now.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
With our proposal, are we done with dredging?
Could I just
No, we're
ask
not.
one clarifying question? In the budget, bid item 100, it says transportation and disposal of contaminated material.
That's,
Is that the potential arsenic?
Yeah.
Yes, that is, and that number
And so-
actually is incorrect. That number is
That's-
gonna change from 6 to 630.
Oh,
which page?
you've got your total budget is only for $750.
Yeah,
For
that's
that
wrong.
item.
That's
That
wrong.
item.
It's in the estimate.
Incorrect.
Yeah, there is.
79,000.
It's
It's
79.
off
Yeah.
by-
$70,750.
Okay. That because it seemed inconsequential.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
That's,
We did raise that question as well, Malcolm. We're like, that doesn't make sense to us.
okay,
Yeah. And we just got that information today.
thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to the final group, dam removal. So same approach, I think we can go through the proposal and talk about how to make it better, right? So I can pull this up, helpful, but really floor is open. We've heard, some discussion around talking things out. Right, but what else? People wanna suggest for this filter?
Oh, yeah, we did make
Yes.
some changes to this, the proposal that you've received.
Oh, you have to adopt as well?
I'm gonna pass those out.
All right, great. So if everyone-
You go that
there's
way.
some Minor edits here, the dam removal group, as Malcolm said, didn't have a chance to meet for period, obviously. Yeah.
The clerk screwed up twice.
Oh.
Yes.
And I'm gonna share these with the group. Yeah, folks, take a minute to review those. I'm going to send around this to the full task force, and of course, I'll share this with the public as well.
Are we gonna review the comments from Keith? Or how long have we done?
Yeah, so thanks, Vicky. So I mentioned earlier, we had received some written comments in advance of the meeting. They were shared with the dam removal group. We didn't want to overburden the full task force given all the prep for today. So we'll share those. They're detailed, there's a lot of comments in them. And also, we want to open up the floor to Keith, who's on the line as well, to share his thinking, but also to everyone, right, on your overall thoughts. Recognizing we'll all have a chance to share any comments. Yeah, let's go ahead.
I did not figure out how to see the comments.
Yeah,
You had to download it. Yeah, I
What-
figured that
But then
out.
what program did you open it up in?
I opened it up as a PDF, but you
Yeah.
have to download the document to
Nice.
see it.
I just used preview.
No, you have to download the document
Somebody-
onto your
Okay.
device.
Where you have to hit. the
So
button
I
next to
guess
it.
my question is, what do you guys use for the PDFs and not preview?
I can do it in, Liz, I can help you out. I'll be able to do it.
Okay, as long as you can someone be able to do it, yeah, I will assume, I'll knock on your door first.
Yeah.
So, yeah, comments on the dam removal group, right? Floor is open.
Come on, don't run out of steam in that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I noticed right off the bat was I thought that the attempt to create a narrative about the history of the pond at the beginning was something that we probably want to pull out and agree to that narrative and park it someplace. I know we've talked about the history in other places and other times, but I think that, we ought to be able to sort of have one statement that says what's been the situation. That goes directly to some of the frequently asked questions that are there too. So I thought it was nice that the group actually did that, and, to the extent that there's any tidbits of that sprinkled in other proposals, I would suggest consolidating that and coming up with a history of the pond somewhere.
That's shared across the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul got that.
Couple things, I'm wondering, so you have three different figures in here. They're all instructive. Can you consolidate those into one figure that has everything on it? Or will that complicate things? Because I was trying to look, I was working from table one and trying to see where these various
I
things
think we
were.
could do that.
And consolidate, if you could, that would be very helpful, to look at what the proposal, all the elements.
Yeah.
And it just, on the cost, just a couple of questions, which I couldn't find. Have you defined what the adaptive management is in this proposal? It's in the table,
Where are you looking for?
looking at
Page
the
6.
cost table.
It's adaptive management 5-year plan.
Yeah. Have you defined that in the proposal? Did I miss it?
We have it on page 1 and I think on page 7 again, we say it's like this must, page 1 says that review must be accompanied by adaptive management plan to incorporate the mandate of the NRC and have it funded to monitor for and address any incursion of invasive plant life such as Streptomyces and so on.
Okay.
So it's a tool to see what's happening, what plans are coming, and how to react to it. And of course, it's a cost associated.
Yeah.
So that's a 5-year plan, so that's 5 years of cost. I'm looking at the operation and maintenance costs.
So later on, page 7 has it,
Did it?
on page 7 has it, like, we should re-up this every, should look at it every 5 years and see.
Yeah.
So is this hiring a consultant to do this? Is that what it is? Or what is this?
No.
What is 150?
It's using, well, we had discussed that it would obviously be the NRC to decide if we were expecting they would use NRC staff. To do that. Am I mistaken?
I think it's an estimate, as you see in the budget table. We base this estimate on taking the alternatives analysis budget and saying it's probably gonna cost more than that. Multiply it by 3. Going from 50,000 to 150,000.
Is that staff time?
And that is,
Going to this.
I think it could be staff time. Dealy could speak to this, adaptive management of the marsh, restore the stream going forward for 5 years. Could be invasive management, in which case it could be hiring a contractor, it could be the contractor coming back to patch up a section of the dam that are blowing out in a flood, or a section of bank or something.
And of course, this is a normalization. Are we including staff time, the cost of staff time in all of these?
I think that's what Sven was suggesting that we should.
I would
So
say
that equals
with
to apples.
adaptive management, that would be something that we would have a contractor for, because we don't have the capacity to do
When it comes to Martin's earlier point, nothing is for free.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
30,000 a year
We have to do
enough?
it the same, because I don't think we.
So is
Exactly.
30,000 a year
Staff
enough
time.
for you to do what we just described then?
Sorry.
Yeah.
My question is, should we, all these proposals, including the no action.
The management- The
Management.
management.
Should put staff time.
I think so. I mean, we're. If you look at what we do say about cost and no action, we basically say it's in the budget already, but we can. Try and make some efforts to get it pulled out of the budget so that we can at least look at what it is, so the dam inspections, those kinds of things are already being done. And presumably paid for.
Similarly,
I would say that anything that is above and beyond what is being done now from a staff perspective should be accounted for, because there is a cost.
So is that enough money then, Delia, then if we were to say we were gonna give you 30,000 a year, you could use it to stabilize the channel? Do invasive, hire somebody. to do
I'm hoping
invasive-
you guys can tell me that, because it's not, I don't know the answer to that. It's
kind of hurt.
Well, it's an unknown as to what will be.
Yeah.
The main anticipation
That's the
is, I think. Preventing, the real discussion we had was around invasives, Phragmites and, what's the weed? Yeah. We have. Playing catch up, well, we have to be able to be on top of.
Right.
And so we have to be able to actually inspect the area on a very regular basis.
And was it,
Just
what was
thinking
the
that-
cost in the alternatives analysis?
50,000. Yeah.
4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So in the interest of like time tonight, we can continue to
Yeah.
look at, we can talk about a contract, I can talk to our colleagues,
Mhm.
because again, we heard from DPR about multiple summer and we can get something more here.
Great, thanks, Justin. Yeah, I think, given time and stamina, right, I think big picture questions that you think we really need to talk about as a group related to this proposal. What are those, right? And recognizing we can bring in specific pieces that you want the group to look more into, through written comments. Are there burning issues that people feel we really need to talk about?
But just more the normalization, we didn't.
Yes.
Great, so I hear Paul, and then who's that speaking?
William Gibson.
Not public yet, William, we'll after that in a few
The,
minutes.
I'm not sure the CPC costs should be in here, I mean, especially for Gerald, it's already, so it's in an application. If it is, we ought to put them in ours, but, probably should be.
Yeah, we have the CPC costs in ours because we have, it's almost 3 million, well, $2.5 million. And you said that there was another 550,000 that was for the restoration ones. How is that what you're talking about?
No, this is talking about new things like, the trail network would go to CPC for funding.
Yeah,
Or
actually, got the
the
Jerome,
fishing platform would go to CPC. for funding.
Jerome CPC
Yes.
Yeah,
stuff and
the recreation.
and the recreation maintenance.
I don't-
It's fine to leave it here for now, but let's think about.
I think if Toby,
Yeah.
and Rachel could in there. Comparing the proposal sort of push us on what is status quo, like if in 2 years that's probably gonna be there no matter what we do. Maybe we all set that aside,
Yeah, should,
but improvements that come out, if we're all talking about it, we should all put in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Let's agree with it.
yeah, by the time this goes public, it may not be approved, but it probably will be. So
And even that was just.
there hasn't been any votes, but yeah, probably will.
But I think it's a good exercise to say, this is the cost of everything, no matter where it comes, yeah. And then you can look at where it's come from, it's CPC, if the 1.1 million dam removal, we get a certain percentage from the state, when it comes from the state. But it's good to see what is the full baked-in cost of what the proposal presented.
Do you have any idea of what your chances are of getting any money from the state for government?
I think in this case, it's more a question of the timeline, about where the priority stack a relatively new dam would sit.
Right.
And how that sits then and how other dams are taken down. So therefore, I think it's in a certain way, you have to think about what the timeline of this realization is, how long does it take to get the permitting, take to get funding, and then in a certain way, we as a group have to think of is this do no action group actions, how much time does it bring us if we would go that path? That's then where we build bricks.
You know, it's interesting. I see actually the no action group, whatever, as as you said before, a bridge for any decision that's made. You know, we don't even know, and I think the timeline we're looking at for any of these proposals is at least a couple, 3 years. I mean, between having to go to town meeting potentially, having to get once you get it approved, then you've got to have it permitted. So we're really 3-4 years out. I mean, so it's almost like I'm feeling from all this conversation that maybe it's going to be this short-term action stuff first. And then, okay, then what is the longer term action? Is it
That's
dam
what
removal? Is it dredging?
mean when I talk about the roadmap.
Right,
Yeah.
Could be,
So-
that we'll have that conversation. as we get-
right,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
And it's not like we want to keep it in a black box, we're just trying to sequence out things
Yeah.
to get
Right.
work done.
Yeah.
So.
So I see Malcolm's hand.
In response to your question, I think the chances of us getting money from the state for dam removal is, we're very low on that.
Yeah, I would think so, just from the presentation.
There is a lot of money out there right now, unless the new administration kills it. For creating fish passage and fish habitats. particularly because of the endangered status of anadromous fish. There's $8 billion in the infrastructure and whatever it is act for this particular subject. So there's a lot of money out there. There's a good chance that we can access it, but it's a competitive process. But then, we've listed a dozen sources from both federal and state and some private in here that we would obviously apply to, and there are others that this was just a nice work just going through.
So I'd just say that the state has reiterated multiple points, including biodiversity goals coming out, the dam removals of high priority. 300 dams by 2030, and we've all heard the term shovel-ready project.
Yeah.
They're gonna be scrambling to find dams. And just to clarify, Malcolm was saying, maybe we're low on the list of hazardous dams, like dams that need to be repaired or removed. But based on this interest in enhancing fish passage, I think we're highly eligible for funding, for that, remove the dams.
Especially with the removal of the target, which I know has.
So, interesting question for me. One is money available for fish passages? So that's an interesting factor, even for the other committees, for the dredging group. That's one thing. The second thing, and I want to just raise this as a larger thing. I love looking at the trail, the proposed trails. There's gonna be some real hard jumps to get those trails put in place, you know. And I'm not sure how significant this is gonna be for you. First, I mean, aside from the fact that some of it's on state land, you might have an easier time there. But then you're going to go in front of all people, NRC, to cross a huge marsh, which we tend to be reluctant to see happen, because it's going to really break up habitat. So that's a significant barrier to go across that huge walkway, you know. So just to say that in passing.
All right. So I want to just name we're close to 8:30, and we've been working really hard and going at these proposals and coming up to a lot of suggestions. Rachel can't jump up. But you know, I think it always envisioned this as a multi-step review of these drafts. So let's, if it's okay with the group, call it for tonight. Okay, congratulate ourselves on a good thorough job well done for what we had an opportunity and time to get through. And let's just briefly talk about some next steps and then turn it back to public comment. So I want to say we had thought about a sort of potential schedule moving forward, including the public meeting, and I think we'll share that with you, excuse me. And I think this is, at this point, we don't know. We'll have to see how the next meeting goes, and if we feel like it's good enough for the task force work, right? And we're ready to go and have the meeting in February, or not. And that's a decision we can make. We don't have to make that tonight, right? But we do want to get everything as ready as we possibly can to enable a meeting in February if the group is ready. So our proposal is we have a meeting the first full week of January. Okay, and let me see if I can get this up. I don't know why I'm not seeing the slides, but so anyway, our proposal is we have a task force meeting the first week of January, and in advance of that meeting, and we'll send out these next steps. Folks who have written comments, send those in by this Friday. Okay. So you've all had a chance to review these. We've had a discussion, written comments in by this Friday. With the permission of the task force, Rachel and I, in communication with the work groups, right, as needed, while of course upholding open meeting law, will take those comments and try to take what we heard today, take what we see in those comments, and come back with some revised consistent drafts where we highlight every change we made, we highlight key questions, right? We note how we incorporated or were unable to incorporate comments, all of that, okay? And we will share that with you in advance, with time in advance, so probably right after the new year, right? So you would have time to review those, and as well as I will share all the comments that came in as well, in advance of that January meeting. We would also prepare other materials that would enable us to have that public meeting in February if we want to. So we could even go ahead and start drafting those pamphlets, so you could have a chance to see them for the mailing, right? Other products around outreach and announcing the public meeting, as well as some suggestions for how that meeting could actually be run. We spend the January meeting, we see how far we get, and if we're ready, we go ahead and do that public meeting in February. We send a mailing out 3 weeks or so in advance, make sure there's lots of notice and awareness raising around it. And then if we can do that, we'd be in a position to have another task force meeting in February, discuss what we heard from the public meeting, and then deliberate and move towards deciding what our recommendations are going to be in March. So this is a conceptual timeline that could get us to ending or completing our task force work by the end of March, which we think is not impossible, but will require some efficient good work and lots of work between meetings to get things ready. And I just want to say we are ready to do that for this group, to serve you, to help us get across the finish line together. Okay. So that's just conceptual. Again, we don't know what's gonna happen at the next meeting, but I just want to check in, like, can we at least move forward with the January meeting, planning on that, and seeing if we're ready at the end of that to move ahead.
Is it one
Yeah.
day in January or just?
Yeah, we'll have one,
decide
not
on the day?
all dates, 6%, we'll set a date.
Okay.
Just to add to that, what I was gonna say, I forgot.
Yeah, Liz, go ahead.
So I just have a question about time. So we're getting you guys comments by the end of this week.
Yeah,
Is there gonna be an ability to turn things around quickly enough to then have the working groups meet for the 6th, considering all the holidays?
yeah.
Um, because
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's our hope. That is our hope.
New Year's Eve, right here.
Yeah.
We're really optimistic, but, you know, we've read the proposals. We've done this work before. We feel like we can do it. And the other thing that I want to mention was just we're trying to time this all out so that we don't run into the town meeting preparations. So that's kind of the reason for that March.
And then I guess my second question to that would be like, would we like, we should be at whatever kind of the subgroups do in their meetings? How much time would other groups need to review?
So you're asking, are we wanting the work groups to meet between now and see the first?
Yeah, that's what, I guess, because I guess what I'm
I
saying
don't
is like,
think
are we
so.
gonna, like, so we're not gonna like. Have time as a subject to kind of digest what we can take it in?
Want to meet before?
I would think someone have to. I mean, for example,
To figure out.
yeah, I mean, for example, we just suggested, I'm not sure they're gonna do it, that the dredging group come back with one proposal.
They do have to meet.
They have to meet.
Yeah.
We have one of these things we're asked to look at for our group. We'll have to meet.
Yeah.
So we have to meet.
Possible for us to do the rolling basis?
What do you mean by that, Rachel?
Like if we make changes, if we review a proposal and we're done, like with our edits, we have our questions, that we ship it out to the whole group and to the work group.
But isn't the point of those edits that we're trying to get them all to
But we still,
be the same?
yeah, but I'm not sure that we would work on all of them at the same.
I know, but we would kind of need to see them together so we understand why you made a certain change. Cause it's like, oh, you changed it to this, to
Your mind,
this, and why did you do
I'm
that?
just spitballing, but
Yeah,
like, what if we run into things where it's like, work group, we need you to clarify this because we don't know what you mean. And here's a suggestion, but
Well, that's different. That's an email.
Why wouldn't you have these, give some time for these subgroups to meet and then get back to you? With their next
Well,
rewrite.
we have to go through the dam removal one. We haven't finished that yet.
Oh, yeah, okay, good point.
Jeff.
Yeah, do I recall from part of our conversations or hearing somewhere else that, in terms of open meeting, while we remain committed to open meetings, sharing transparency, that subcommittees that aren't empowered to make decisions are not held to open meeting requirements. can we sort of, for the purposes of quickly getting together, you know, where the 5 of us, 6 of us could have a phone call or whatever, like 48 hours, anyways. We bypass that, and if it's a hard note, it's fine. But it's not a form of this task
Yeah.
force. And it would allow us to quickly exchange information that. get this
Yeah,
documents.
Says it's a hard no.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I do have an alternative suggestion, which is, I think that. You know, to the extent that we've taken in comments in this meeting about the content of the proposals, it seems to me that the kind of consolidation and normalization work that you guys are talking about doing, you could do based off the documents that we have. And the individual groups could also, in parallel, kind of the feedback they've got and suggest some revisions, which could then be sent to you guys as well. For either incorporation or at least publication alongside of these are the normalized documents based on what we already have. That would allow us to, you know, schedule a meeting in January where we sort of either consolidate those two things or at least have those two sets of input. So I don't see that we need to wait for you to rework all 3 of those proposals into some standard to process the comments that we've already gotten today.
Except that we didn't do the dam removal. We haven't come
At a
to,
level of.
at the same level, and we have a set of
Yeah.
comments from Keith already that we all need to hash out. We all need to read them. And we need to come to agreement on how we're going to propose those. We can't finish ours until this group says,
Yeah. my
How we're gonna
suggestion
handle
is
those
In
things.
terms of completing that, the next time we go through this, we should do it in the exact reverse order. of what we
Absolutely.
Just did.
Yeah.
Because
otherwise I would say, yes, we
Yeah.
could do that, but we're missing a big chunk.
I
of
think that's
information.
fair.
Yeah.
So
we're not done with this.
We're not.
I think we're not done. I do think we, you know, we're eager, I would say, right, to support you through taking some of these written comments and trying to turn them around and be responsive and try to thread the needle on some of them, right? And I think for some of those, I feel like we feel like we could try that without the work group needing to come back to us with additional advice at this point. If the workers want to, do that, I think we very happy to do that, but we also, I think, could come back in January, and also look at these comments, right, and everyone should, and other written comments will come in and we'll treat all those equally.
But we need to talk about those comments, like we did for the No Action Group. We
Yeah.
spent 45 minutes
Mhm.
talking about those questions together, so we could
Yeah,
come to some
yeah.
realization. We did it with the dredging group. We all talked about what concerns we have. We haven't done that with the dam. removal.
So,
And
yeah,
so I think it's, I think we have to.
really feels like this first meeting in January is that.
Yeah, maybe
Follow-up
maybe
meeting.
the agenda is to take your stab
Yeah.
at normalizing. Groups get the feedback that they have already, bring those back to the meeting, and if those normalized documents can be published at least, let's call it by New Year's, so that there's some reading time for us, then we do what we just did again with, based on those and see whether we've gotten closer to what we're.
And start with dam removal.
Start
this
with
time.
Starting with them.
So, well, I'm not sure, so Mark, I understand, so we're talking the first meeting we have in January, whenever that happens to be, we're gonna do. Look at dam removal, the same kind of a examination we did with the other groups. The other 2 groups may be ready to give us a second draft based on what they have heard and what you have heard from them. And then we'll move to the next step of redoing the synopsis after that.
So that's not what I heard, but I wanna test. I think what I heard is we are going to do an attempt at the synopsis.
How are you gonna synopsisize the dam removal information when we haven't talked about it and come to agreement?
So I think we heard some key themes that came out of both the comments that you can see in Keith's submissions, and I think what we raised today. And how we deal with questions of uncertainty and making sure that's dealt with consistently across the 3 workers and it's called out where it exists.
Okay.
And we're being clear on where information is coming from.
Mhm.
We heard, we had an extensive discussion, right, about the challenge and some ideas around how to handle the idea of the base case, right? And the things that are in addition to that, like the trails for the dam removal proposal, for example. Right, and so I think we can integrate that and come back with suggestion about how to name that and talk about that in a way that's consistent across the proposals. There are some questions that are around, how do we deal with the descriptions of the history, for example, that are kind of in one group, but not others, and maybe could be brought out overall. We could do that, right? So I, having, I don't want to speak for anything, we did not have the full discussion on dam removal, and I think we would not say that, I will guarantee you, whatever effort we do, there will not be perfect, and we'll need to discuss it.
Right.
And I think taking a look at those themes, we had discussions on a lot of that, even if we didn't go into all the details of every comment on dam removal.
There was just, yeah, we heard a lot about the dam removal proposal, even though we didn't actually talk about it. And we totally acknowledge and recognize the role that the task force has in having these full discussions. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do that, but like Toby's saying, I think we can kind of do both. And we'll still have full time to look at that, talk about that proposal.
By all means, go for it. But one way or another, we're gonna need this first meeting in January to do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't see us doing this again and planning for the public meeting at the same meeting.
No.
So we may need two meetings. If you wanna have the public meeting in February, we may need two meetings. We need a separate meeting just for the public.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I do that.
So if you keep on the schedule, you're gonna have to have
And I
another
think the
meeting.
history,
Well, I have a question regarding the proposals, sort of the form of the proposals in the public meeting, and this was alluded to in the conversation tonight. Are you, because there was the recommendation along the way that the criteria be removed from the proposals that go to the public. Which leads me to wonder and ask you, do you see this as potentially two different forms of each of the proposals? A more concise one that's the base case. I don't want to say that, just a more concise one for the public. And then when we move into the deliberation process and that the proposals get bulked up again because of all the details. Do you see that happening or?
no.
I don't think,
I think it's.
we're getting to planning for
one
the public meeting, but I think the public meeting, we should let the public know what we've been doing, what these three proposals are,
Okay.
we get feedback. Whether we need to then have another one on the criteria, I don't think so. I think it's our part of deliberation to apply the
Yeah.
criteria to
No,
make the
I
decision.
understand
But the public needs to know what we're doing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what the content of these proposals.
So
are.
the distinction is that the task force has really agreed that the criteria section is part of the deliberative process, and you want to keep that
Our process.
for later, but the rest of the proposals as they stand should be what goes for public review. Okay, that's.
I think it's all part of the same thing. I think that the criteria provide a context that helps frame each of the proposals.
Well, then we need to do it together, because there's some people who said, yes, it does this, and we need to all
Yeah,
agree, yes,
I
it
think
does
that,
this, or no, it doesn't.
in terms of describing what we've been up to in the public meeting, I think that pulling out the criteria and saying these proposals were developed to try to address these criteria as a separate thing without actually putting a finger on the scale and saying this proposal does these things and that proposal does those
That would
things.
work. That would work.
So the criteria that we're aiming at in developing the proposals was that,
Yeah,
and just state that.
share that, you're saying,
Yeah.
and not how we,
And not how
graded them.
the self-evaluations of the proposals was done, because we haven't really
Yeah.
focused on,
because the grading
Whether
should
that
be
was-
done by all of us.
yeah,
Right.
I think that's future work to be done.
Yeah, I
Because
just
we
finished
did
it.
say part of this that we were gonna create these based on the Concord.
Envision.
Yeah.
Envision 2030.
So we're looking for those,
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
and encouraging people to also look for those things and give us their feedback on how well they think the proposals address those.
We should
those
publish the
particular things.
criteria for the
Exactly.
public. Yeah.
Right, I just finished the task force report, we did exactly that, we laid out the criteria.
Yeah.
So that's how we made a decision, get feedback on the criteria, but not on our scoring.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Not the big question.
Yeah, Malcolm.
I may be being dense here, but I can't quite work out what we're doing. Are we going to get together as a group? Because a lot of the comments we've received so far, some of them are based on, things that we've already changed. Some of them are clear misinterpretations of what's written. Some of them are justified and some of them are off the wall. So we need to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Well, at the
Before
next meeting,
you
no, we'll do it at the next meeting.
sort of
Yeah.
start messing around with it,
Yeah,
or
I
you
know.
may take a comment that, isn't relevant.
That's why I think the
Here's
synopsis
a
is
suggestion.
too early.
Okay, we do as described, where we don't, but we will take a stab at it, right? And if we get it wrong at the next meeting and you didn't have a chance to come together as a group and you want to share it then, we'll talk about it then. If the group is interested in getting together, right, and processing the feedback and giving additional kind of work group vetted guidance to Rachel and me, great, go for it. Okay,
No, guys, I think to be fair, I think we have to go through the comments and hash what Malcolm just said out. Before you start to put it into a different format, I think we have to go through it in the format that everyone has read it, the way we published it, and walk through it, because you're gonna go and like do this to it, and we're gonna be like, that's not what we said, and that's not how we said it. We're gonna put it into these categories of base plus additions, history descriptions, or uncertainty sections, so that they're all similar, but we're not ready to have our stuff pulled apart yet until we all hash it out.
I wasn't envisioning pulling it apart.
No, I thought you were gonna do an uncertainty section and try to make all the uncertainties.
Wasn't planning to rewrite it.
Oh, I thought you were
Yeah,
gonna
but
try
if
to.
you don't, look, what you seems to what needs to be done is the groups need to meet. The groups need to meet, right? They're not gonna meet before Christmas.
No.
Before holidays. They're not gonna meet.
Or even New Year's.
Or New Year's. They're not gonna meet till the first week in January, very likely. We make promises, it'll probably be the first week in January, the groups will meet. The second week and revise their proposals. They could, by the second week in January, we might be able to have our group meeting to go over those proposals, to hash out the things we haven't heard, et cetera, and pick it up from there, and then turn it over to you to do
That's
your
right.
synopsis.
I agree.
That seems to be the way we probably want.
So
to
you
do
could be preparing for the public meeting, but not trying to understand what's going on in this
Right.
until we're done.
Right, and you could be working on things on your own, you don't have to share it with us yet, but we need to do this process, I think, that way for ourselves. That's my read. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes,
Yeah,
that feels better.
Give us more breathing time.
there's a little more breathing time. I think it works better for us. We have a chance to meet as in our silent groups.
just want to name. Fine, right, this is your way forward. I would, under this timeline, I think we're probably moving into like. April, May, June, July, like we're really,
Just by pushing.
No, wait a minute. I used to be saying we're moving into maybe April, but June, July?
No.
Let's not push that.
Yeah.
And we're not worried about
Yeah,
that.
I'm not worried about
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, I know,
There's a lot of
in terms of
meetings.
space,
There's a lot of
a
meetings.
lot of space gets eaten up, but we'll have to find the space to
That's
meet,
right.
that's all.
That's right.
That's all.
Like Giroux Park.
We'll meet at Delia's house or something.
Or Giroux Park, can you get
Public
ready
comment,
for us?
right?
Giroux
we
Park,
we
get
are,
ready
we
for
are
us.
definitely pushing this beyond March,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Right.
It is, it needs.
January, Captain?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I feel like we can still do it all in January for this kind of.
We might get it.
We need to push progress on this phase, but I mean, realistically, the warrant deadline is February 19th.
Yeah, we're
We're not gonna.
We're not gonna have it, no.
Or any. of
And we
those-
already said that, we're not
That's
making.
the way
it,
it has.
right?
We decided that a long time
Yeah.
ago, so,
No, it wasn't,
But I
it wasn't
think-
about the one, it was about finding space.
yeah.
Well,
We have
timing, people are occupied with,
There's,
people get caught up with town meeting.
there's gonna be
Right,
the
so-
250th, which is the real French.
Yeah.
combination.
You can't cover everything, so you just can't. You have to go home, you have to move with your own
That's right.
pace.
So
It's the pace
are
we
we
need.
talking about having a subgroup meeting in the first week of January and then?
No,
a
the whole
task
group.
force
No, I thought some,
No.
Session.
groups have to meet. They're gonna have
Second
to,
week
your
of
group
January.
has
What are we
to
gonna
meet.
do without this feedback though?
Well,
right.
no,
Yeah.
to look at, we have a set of feedback, let's look at it, so we don't have to rehash it a second time.
But this group has to talk about that feedback, like, we can't do it by ourselves, it'll just be us going like, I agree, I don't agree, I agree, I don't agree.
I think all the members of the task force need to take time to Toby's urgent to send comments by Friday.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity to provide feedback.
Yeah.
I agree with Vicky, we need to get together, digest that, incorporate. Counter argue or push back on or not accept, whatever. We haven't, settled any of that in around this table with the other proposals, I think. The authors have had feedback to consider. And then we meet as a subgroup the first week of January, we meet as a big group the next week. And if there are any things to dust up on our proposal, we do it, but everyone has had their opportunity to.
So does everybody have Keith's comments?
Yeah, we all have.
Keith's.
The reason that I'm still supportive of letting Rachel and Toby attempt this, though, is because that's gonna take us 2 passes anyway.
Mhm.
And we could meet in early January and we can have the versions of these that we're dealing with now to reference for comments and so forth. And we can also have these, more standardized versions to understand what happened. And I think we, in the feedback session, especially if we start to run out of just general comments, then we can focus on how do these things fit into this new format, which looks a little bit more standard. And I think that that's a reasonable engagement for that first meeting, recognizing that that's probably the first read of those documents, which then have to be finalized anyway.
So Mark, I understand what you're saying. Let them draft something.
Yes.
For us. But they could still send it to us without talking to us
Right.
we could use in our small groups.
Yeah, and we can have, the original and the modified version of no action sitting there and provide feedback on both of those versions as we talk about it in January, and do that for all 3 groups, so that hopefully we're bringing that work product to a more, more finished state, so that we have some hope of being ready to publish it to the public, because otherwise we definitely have to have another meeting before we're ready to do that.
But like our first meeting that we had as a whole task force,
Yeah,
I do agree with Vicky. I think that we still need the discussion about dam removal
There's stuff
that we
on
had
there, yeah.
with the other 2 groups.
I agree.
I think that's important because
Yeah.
maybe one person's gonna say something that triggers something else, and
That's
I
right.
think that's beneficial for all of us to be
I
able to
think
do
that's
that.
the
There's
a-
first
there's
group meeting.
questions
First
on
group meeting in
that
January.
came up
So that's,
that we need to talk about. And one of the questions was, is Scout Island going to be accessible the way it's described here? We all need to get to a place where we understand what we're saying about access to Scout Island. We have a scheme, we have a proposal. Is it what the task force is comfortable with saying is
Yeah.
ensuring access to Scout Island and with watercraft?
Yeah.
That came into question, and so,
Yeah.
are we gonna continue putting it into your thing, we're gonna put it into our thing, or do we talk about it first?
So here's another possibility.
Point of order.
Understand that, Vicky, and I just wanna ask, I mean, what you're describing makes sense. Mark, are you suggesting that work groups that are ready to have a proposal? Go to CBI.
we should have to look at all
Yes,
3.
I think you have to look at all 3 at the same time.
I think
So
that's the
I was just trying to get some parallel work going on, so that we had some version of this new version that hasn't been created, nobody's seen yet,
Yeah.
to begin to give feedback on that while we're still looking at the content.
I wish
I thought it was possible to do
So
that.
I would just say, like, to this point, to the extent that there's a worry about the work group going ahead back to something that's different from what we did, we're happy to backtrack, and we're not worried about having done that extra work, right, so to speak. I mean, I'm curious what the reaction to Mark's proposal is, so we would, I think, under this idea, do the work on the writing up, right?
Once it wants.
For the one that, well, yeah, sure, or
I think
all.
you have to
either
do
or.
3 of them together.
And then we send that out the first week of January for the work groups to think of, right, and incorporate into your deliberations that week, right? See how we may have handled it. And then we come back and we talk that next week after that, and the work groups respond and share how they dealt with the questions and we have an open discussion about all the materials that have been created. So I think that's what we were suggesting, Mark, and I'm curious.
Yeah.
What the group thinks, yeah, Jeff.
If I understand, if I were to, two kind of touches, one is like coming up with sort of a
Yeah.
template format, so there's a little bit of
Mhm.
parallel, more proposal, more parallel, and then incorporating some feedback that you've gathered here.
Yeah.
That second part, would you do track changes?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yep.
We name every change that we suggest, and I think it would be our attempt to kind of thread the needle in the various forms of feedback that we have. So the work groups could benefit from seeing that when you're trying to figure out how you want to address some of it, and it's your decision as a work group, and you can tell us if you don't like it and you want to do something else.
Yeah, that's great.
Or accept it.
Can we get you comments by Sunday night, Monday morning, like, because we have the weekend to get, if you're gonna work on it on the weekend? we'll
It's
do it
okay,
too.
yeah, I'm
Okay,
not gonna look at it. I'm not gonna look at
because I'll probably work on it on the weekend, so that'll be good.
So did we
it.
want?
But Sean, you around that week? From the exhaustion.
I think you have enough, I think you have enough input to plan on an agenda for them.
Right. So great, we'll do that, and sounds like we're gonna aim for a week later for the January meeting,
Yeah.
like, so workers have a chance to meet before.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful if we could schedule that meeting.
Yes, please.
Today.
Right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the next
So that
few
we
meetings
post it and-
would be helpful, because those last minute meetings, always be on.
So we're looking at the week of January. Yeah, January 13th.
13th or 14th.
I think just to pick a date and then we'll find, the room location will be.
And I'll just, full disclosure, I'm gonna be out of the country that week, so it will be Rachel. Yeah. The week of January 13th.
13th.
Do we want to go with a Tuesday or a Thursday again? That's kind of what we've been doing.
Can we go to Thursday? Tuesday are the worst traffic in the city.
Really?
Oh, my God. An hour and 45 minutes to get into the city.
Thursday, the 16th, what do people think about that?
Does that work?
West on Thursday again.
Yeah.
It's why I want, like, no kids in the afternoon.
Yeah,
day.
awesome.
That's like a trip.
Okay.
Perfect. Works for me. I don't have anything in my
I'm okay too.
busy schedule.
Yeah, same here. So that would be Thursday. We meet at 6 PM, right?
Yep. And we'll find out the location afterwards, Julia.
Correct.
The 16th?
16, yes.
16th, you're on, Rachel.
Okay. And what, do we want to leave it there now, and
Well, let's schedule the next one. after that.
likely is a meeting in 2 weeks from there?
The 30th,
Week of the 27th.
Yep, yes,
Can we do the 30th? Again, it's a Thursday,
works for me.
I'm not out of the country that week, but
the
that's.
whole week.
That Thursday.
You don't want to log on?
Not that week. I don't have to be here, but probably.
January 30th, I think is the suggestion.
Yeah.
For the public meeting?
For
No,
the
task force,
another
no,
task
task
force
force.
meeting. Yeah.
Probably that'll be the one where we talk
That'll be
about the
one
public
we're-
meeting.
public
Yeah.
meeting. So we're probably looking after February break for the public.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll be back.
Too bad.
Nice try, Delia. Nice
Yeah,
try.
Delia.
Would be looking at the 24th, the public meeting.
Well, we don't know yet, right?
No, I think it should be the week before that, because it's still very, isn't it?
Yeah.
Week before sooner.
Oh,
No, the week of the 24th. But yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's right. Most likely, if
Yeah,
that's what we're gonna.
ready.
Yeah. All right,
Should we do the next one too, February 13th,
well, we could do the week
so that
of
we're ready for,
March, for the public meeting.
before the public
We
meeting?
definitely need a meeting before the public. meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
well, we need one to go over the reports again, we need one to plan for the public meeting. Like even just plan the outline of it, and then one right before the public meeting, right, or no? Maybe?
Why don't we start with two?
Why don't we
for
start
now?
with two,
Okay.
and yeah, we can take it.
Because I can't imagine we'll be done with the reports at the next meeting. Yeah.
Stay optimistic.
Yeah.
Play it by ear.
All right, you guys have been very, very patient and a lot of standing. I'm gonna turn it back to Bill and Chris to,
So Chris, I'm just gonna do a public,
Yes.
public comment.
That works for me.
Now, everyone, we're really tired, so, we'll turn it over to, yeah, so we have 2 minutes for the public comments at first per person. Again, we ask you to be courteous and talk to the point. So anyone have public comments? Mary, you want to introduce yourself again and all that?
Mary Weinberg, my medicine's holding notes. Just quickly, as I was sitting there, I realized that there's an elephant in the room. This building, Bobby Wheeler houses the Council on Aging. And no comment has been made, no discussion has been made about what I said is the research that has been done on blue space and the elderly and the community at large. My ex-husband was a wonderful doctor, has written many articles that have been around the world of quality assurance. He was very interested in this after I shared with him these articles. He's researched it more, and he's going to write a paper, and I will submit it to the group about the importance of blue space and everything in the pond and how it affects the elderly and the rest of the community at large and why. This is research that's been done. There was one more thing I wanted to say to you, which I will submit that. That when I was down at Jerome Park this summer, and you know, we had a horrendous hot summer, and I don't have money anymore to go away. So the only respite I have is to go down to the new park. It was cooler down at Jerome Park. At first I thought it was just because I wanted it to be nice. 2 other friends my age came down and both noticed the same thing. And I did see a little bit online about how ponds do cool off the area during the day. I don't have air conditioning in my house. So these are things that have not been discussed, and I hope when I present this article, it will bring into the front that this should be part of the discussion of what we do with Warner's Pond. I think it's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks like.
Anyone else?
Yes, online.
And
Anna.
Anna?
Yes, Anna Feldwig, 343 Commonwealth. I had a question that I wondered if the dam removal group could include in their description of dam removal. Is it putting a hole in the dam but leaving it there? Or is it taking the whole structure down as if it were never there? That's my question. It can be answered by the group later.
So just a quick, it's not laid out in our proposal, but it's in the basis of the design part. Please someone correct me if I've got things wrong. But the proposal is the 2 spillways come out entirely. The urban berm on the side, so kind of the hill that moves into the woods behind my house, you know, at the very end. That goes within that little island that you kind of see now, that piece of the berm stays. Does that give you a clearer picture?
Yes.
And that document is on.
It's kind of weird, a stone wall in the middle of.
Any other comments? Anyone? No?
Yes.
I'd like to say something.
Oh, someone else?
House got flood the shit out of them.
Anna, you're.
And we're done, right? There we go. Okay, anyone else?
Yes,
Yes, Mr. Gibson.
yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm very impressed with all the research that the Warner's Pond Task Force has done. An incredible amount of work. A great education for everyone concerned. Last time I spoke, I was concerned about doing some research on excuse me, the history of the maintenance of Warner's Pond. I thought that might be helpful. What they did back in the 60s successfully to keep the weeds from growing. I haven't been to all the meetings. I don't know whether this topic was discussed with the public through these meetings or not, but I would like to be able to hear some more information on the
history of the maintenance of Warner's Pond. I'm personally gonna look into it myself to see if I can access that type of information, but it was always in my mind when this task force was developed and concerns about Warner's Pond and the overgrowth of the weeds. It's atrocious. I was on the pond twice this past summer. I just remember, once again, I'm repeating myself. Back in the 60s, I think the most cost-effective way they found to maintain the pond and keep the weeds from growing was to drain it and let the sun kill the weeds off. The same process can be done in the winter time, according to the Army Corps engineer. He said the frost will do the same thing. I would like to hear more discussion on that topic also. Thank you so much and have a great night and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Those are very good comments for us. And I don't think we looked at the 60s, but we will try to do maybe some more research on history.
Well, and I wonder with, you mentioned that the dam or the pond was drained and it might have been, under a prior dam
Yes,
scenario that was a possibility, but
yes.
it has been evaluated now to do a drawdown, as you spoke about, to allow the water to drain out and allow the frost to do its work on the weeds. And it's with the dam construction that we have now, it's not feasible to do that without some pretty serious additional manipulation like pumping, and you would have standing water remaining in the pond and you would not get the frost condition, unfortunately. Could you provide us with your address for the record, please, Mr. Gibson?
I think you
I
did.
think he's presented, he's commented at a previous
Yeah.
meeting, so we can find that.
So back to you.
All right, since there's no further business in front of the task force, at the immediate moment, I am adjourning the meeting at, 9:13.
9:08.
9:08.
9:08.
9:08.